Chapter 42. In the study, 2 dragon-scale guards stood solemnly and knelt down to greet the leader. They then presented a file that recorded all of Shen Miao-Chi's experiences from birth till now. Yu Pinyin took it and looked at it expressionlessly. To be able to fall from a wealthy merchant's daughter to a servant, he had already guessed that the family Shen had met with a great calamity but did not expect that he was the one who pushed the blame. It turned out that the family Shen was considered a wealthy family in Lingnan, and the history of Father Shen's rise was quite legendary. He was originally an expert in grave robbing and excavating gold and used the antique business to cover up his shady side business. Later on, Furen Shen gave birth to a son and a daughter. In order to accumulate good fortune for his children, he no longer did the wicked thing of digging up ancestral graves. Before Shen Miao-Chi was 10 years old, her life was smooth sailing and she lived a life of luxury. When she was 10 years old, she followed Father Shen to Luoyang to deal with antiques and coincidentally met the crown prince who was recuperating at the relay station. Shen Miao-Chi's offering of medicinal herbs was not successful and she was caught as a spy. Father Shen used 70 to 80% of his wealth to redeem her and the family fled back to Lingnan. At that time, the one who ordered the arrest was Yu Pinyin himself. From then on, the Shen family started to decline. It was no wonder that Shen Miao-Chi still remembered him after 4 years. When they met, she would shout out hatred, revenge and other words. She was afraid that she would place all the blame on him and would remember and curse him every day and night. Thinking of this, Yu Pinyin sneered and continued to read. After returning to Lingnan, the family Shen gradually could not make ends meet. In order to not let his children suffer, Father Shen had no choice but to return to his old business. Just at this time, an old customer came to the door and asked him to go to an ancient tomb to steal a gilded Mother Buddha statue buried in the main cave and paid half of the deposit. Because the reward was very generous, it was just enough to save the family Shen who was unable to recover. Father Shen was immediately moved and after consulting many documents, he was sure that there was a Buddha statue in the tomb and rushed over that night. After a narrow escape, Father Shen brought the Buddha statue home and was unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. But in these 3 days, Shen Miao-Chi opened the box containing the Buddha statue out of curiosity and accidentally broke one of the Buddha's hands. Because she often saw Father Shen repairing antiques, she unexpectedly learned how to use transparent glue to glue the Buddha's hand back and put it back into the box. After Father Shen woke up, he quickly informed that person to come and get the goods. The 2 of them were so excited that they didn't inspect the items properly before completing the transaction. After the man returned home and carefully examined the statue, he discovered that he had been fooled. Because he had yearned for this Buddha statue for a long time, he hated the Shen family's father who had ruined his treasure and cheated him of his money. He set up a series of traps, causing the Shen family's family to be ruined and the Shen family to be imprisoned. The last 10% of the family property was used to atone for his crimes. Shen Fu cried out that he had been wrongly accused and died in front of the prison door. Shen Fu also fell ill and could not recover. As for the family Shen, those concubines had long stolen the family property and ran away with their concubine children. Shen Miao-Chi also had a older brother named Shen Yuanqi. Since then, he shouldered the entire family's livelihood and signed a death contract with a local large family to become a servant. He used the money from selling himself to rent a small house for Mother Shen and his younger sister to live in. Mother Shen's illness was critical and at the time when she needed someone to take care of her the most, Shen Miao-Chi stole the remaining 10 taels of silver and ran away. When she went out, she only took a few clothes and a piece of swaddling cloth. It could be assumed that Mother Shen could not endure the guilt in her heart and told her about her past, but in exchange, she was so heartless and resolute in her treatment. Mother Shen could not find the person and could not find the money, so she vomited a few mouthfuls of blood and passed away in a few days. The family Shen brother and sister went their separate ways from then on. Shen Miao-Chi walked towards the capital with her head buried and met a caravan on the way. She spent 2 taels of silver to ride their carriage but did not expect to be robbed by bandits. The people in the caravan were either dead or injured. Shen Miaoqi hid under the carriage and was about to meet with disaster when she was saved by Zhao and Shun's family, who was reporting to the capital. She willingly sold herself to the young miss of the Zhao family as a slave with the idea of going to the capital together. She originally thought that she could finally sit back and relax, but did not expect that Zhao and Shun would offend the higher-ups because he was too upright, and the promotion that he worked hard for 8 years was awarded to another colleague. Zhao and Shun, who received the letter from the higher-ups, could only turn back halfway and continue to be the magistrate of Yunzhou. Shen Miaoqi not only did not go near the capital but went further and further away. At this time, she was already scared witless by the bandits and did not dare to go on the road alone. She could only stay in the Zhao family and wait for an opportunity. This wait lasted for 4 years. Because Zhao and Shun had always been working in a remote and bitter place like Yunzhou, he did not have any connections with the major powers in the capital. Those few hundred caddies of charcoal had already been transported to the monastery half a month ago, and the Zhao family was still on the road at that time. Shen Miaoqi just happened to add charcoal to the fire when the crown princess appeared. In fact, there were 30 to 40 people who added charcoal to the fire that day, and only Shen Miaoqi was the most unlucky. Closing the file, Yu Pinyin did not speak for a long time. The 2 dragon scale guards silently presented a piece of swaddling cloth. Since they had already investigated Shen Miaoqi's experience, they naturally knew that Shen Furen and Ho Furen had given birth in the same cave. Following that, Shen Furen covered his tracks and returned to Lingnan and avoided doing business with the influential officials in the capital. The 2 of them had already guessed some things, and when they saw this piece of swaddling cloth and associated it with the words that Shen Miaoqi shouted in prison, everything became clear. No matter how rich and powerful the family Shen was, they would not be able to get the tribute from the palace. The dragon scale guard was the most powerful knife in the emperor's hands and held many secrets that the officials could not reveal to outsiders. If their mouth was not secure, they would not live long. Yu Pinyin dared to let them investigate so naturally he was not afraid of them knowing. He took the swaddling cloth and looked at it before throwing it to the side. One of the dragon scale guards saw that his mood was not good and hesitated for a moment before reminding, "Leader, this Shen Yuanqi is this year's top scorer, Shen Yuanqi." The family that he sold himself to was farsighted and originally wanted him to be the study boy of the D Sun. After seeing that he was a genius, they had an idea. Not only did they remove his slave status, they also adopted him to study so that he would have more help in the future. This year he was indeed the top scorer, and recently he has been inquiring about Shen Miaoqi and second young Mississippi. "Do you want to?" He used his hand as a knife and slashed at his neck. Since this kind of thing happened, it was natural to silence him to protect the reputation of the Marquis household. If Shen Yuanqi were to come to their door and cause trouble, wouldn't the Marquis household become a joke? The second young miss who was protected by Master Ho would be the first to be harmed. Yu Pinyin pondered for a moment before waving his hand. "I have my own plans. Don't act blindly without thinking. You may leave." The 2 of them did not dare to disobey and bowed before leaving the study. Shen Miaoqi was transferred from the dungeon of the White Cloud Taoist Temple to the dungeon of the Dragon Scale Guard. The place was spacious, but the scene was even more frightening. The Dragon Scale Guard did not avoid people during the interrogation. Instead, they liked to tie the prisoners up to watch the interrogation. They either skinned the skin and scraped the bones, gouged out the eyes, or cut the tongue. Shen Miaoqi was so frightened that she fainted several times that day. Sometimes she even suspected that she was no longer in the human world but was in the 18 layers of hell. She heard the prisoners in the dungeon mention that the handsome youth who interrogated her that day was the leader of the Dragon Scale Guard. His methods were 100 times more cruel than these people. That year, the rebel Prince Yu was captured alive by him. After he was brought back to the capital, he was personally executed under the instructions of the emperor. He cut a total of 3,600 times before Prince Yu breathed his last. His ability to kill was evident. The enemy that she cursed in her heart tens of thousands of times was actually so powerful and ruthless. Shen Miaoqi knew that she was afraid and desperately prayed that her family would find her soon. As if a lifetime had passed, it was actually only 24 shichen, 1 shichen equals 2 hours. When the prison door was opened again, Shen Miaoqi felt as if it was a lifetime ago. After clearing out the prisoners in the prison, Yu Pinyin slowly walked to the side of the young girl who was curled up in a ball. He did not help her up and did not say a word of concern. He did not ask about what happened to her in the previous 24 shichen. He only bent down slightly and looked at her extremely dirty face. This face was enough like the Lin clan and could not arouse any trace of tender affection from him. Even though this person was his blood-related younger sister, she was only a stranger in his heart. His sympathy had long since been worn away by one bloody massacre after another. Shen Miaoqi struggled for a long time before she crawled up under his oppressive power. She went on her knees to grab his clothes and shouted, "Darren, I am wrongly accused. The premature birth of the crown princess really has nothing to do with me. I am not a servant girl but a young lady from the Marquis household. Begging Darren to help me find my family. In the future, I will definitely repay Darren's benevolence." Yu Pinyin looked at the red robe that had a few black fingerprints on it and frowned as he took a step back. Seeing that she was about to kowtow to him after she finished speaking, he stretched out his foot to stop her forehead that was about to touch the ground. "Don't kneel in front of me. I am your elder brother. Your surname is Yu and you are Marquis Yongla's daughter who was lost for 14 years. He slowly narrated each word and there was no excitement or joy of finding a family member on his face. It was cold as if he was talking about an unimportant matter. Shen Miaoqi raised her head and looked at him blankly. It took her a long time to digest these words. The person who had caused her to be imprisoned twice was actually the family member that she had been searching for 4 years, her elder brother. She simply did not know what kind of expression she should make. She felt that she should laugh a few times to express the joy in her heart or cry bitterly to show the grievances that she had suffered in these few hours. But when she met the young man's dark and cold eyes, she could only quickly lower her head and ask in a trembling voice, You are really my elder brother?" Yu Pinyin did not answer and beckoned for 2 dragon scale guards to come over and ordered, "Take her down and clean her up." The 2 people complied and carried Shen Miaoqi who had weak legs out of the prison cell. 2 shichen later, Shen Miaoqi was wearing a green and gray robe as she sat in a rickety carriage. Yu Pinyin was holding a spring-embroidered knife as he sat opposite her with his eyes closed. Shen Miaoqi's heart had a bad guess as she stammered, "Elder brother, why did you make me wear this black robe? Could it be that he did not intend to acknowledge me and instead wanted to force me to become a monk because I was in prison and lost his face? That's right, he was so cold-blooded and heartless, what could he not do?" The hatred in Shen Miaoqi's heart that had just subsided started to churn violently again. Yu Pinyin was 20 years old and had already killed people like scything flax. He was very sensitive to people's malice and suddenly opened his eyes to look at her. Shen Miaoqi was frightened and quickly lowered her head to grab her clothes as blue veins popped out on the back of her hand. The more she interacted with him, the more she feared this elder brother. Other than indifference, there was no other emotion in his eyes. It was as if she was not his blood-related younger sister but an insignificant stranger. A deathly silence spread in the carriage and after half a quarter of an hour, Yu Pinyin slowly opened his mouth. "You and Xiang are twins. Because your 8 characters are weak, I am afraid that you will die at any time. I had no choice but to send you to Shuiyu Nunnery to be fostered. You will only be brought back to the Marquis household after you are 14 years old. You must remember these words." Whether Shen Miaoqi loved or hated him, it did not matter to him. It was just another mouth to eat. It was originally to protect his reputation. Also, if he brought her back so hastily and people knew about her past as a servant, she would not have the face to see people in the future. Shen Miaoqi obediently nodded her head and secretly remembered the 2 words Xiang. When this Xiang was mentioned, she clearly saw a trace of softness in Yu Pinyan's cold eyes. That person must be the daughter of the family Shen who took over the nest of the magpie. After 14 years of living together, did they really have some feelings for each other? She had snatched away her noble identity and enjoyed the glory and wealth that should have belonged to her. And she suffered for her for 14 years and still did not get any pity from her elder brother. Why did the heavens not open their eyes? Thinking of this, her chest surged with strong unwillingness and resentment. The author has something to say. I am going home after eating and drinking my fill. Thank you to my cute little things and also thank all the friends who supported the original version. Moi. Chapter 43. After settling down Shen Miaoqi, Yu Pinyan headed directly to the Shui residence. This Shui family was a prominent family in Lingnan and had some foundation in the court. However, their descendants were getting worse with each generation and were about to die. But Master Shui was a visionary. Seeing that Shen Yuanqi was extremely intelligent and had an extraordinary mind, he had the thought of loving him and took him as an adopted son. Shen Yuanqi also knew how to repay kindness. After becoming the top scorer, he brought Master Shui's family to the capital and treated them like his own parents. His relationship with the Shui family's eldest son was also very harmonious. Yu Pinyan had received the title of Jade Face King of Hell in his early years. In recent years, as his methods grew, the two words Jade Face were removed and he was directly called Living King of Hell. As the number of lives in his hands increased, the sinister aura around him became heavier and heavier. No matter how handsome he was, it would only make people terrified. Seeing him holding the embroidered spring saber, Master Shui was so scared that his legs trembled and he was drenched in cold sweat. He could not even speak clearly. After stammering for half a day, it was Shen Yuanqi who hurried over to help him out. This official greets Commandant Yu. Shen Yuanqi bowed with his hands clasped in front. His attitude was neither servile nor overbearing and was not alarmed or fearful. Yu Pinyan did not reply and his sharp gaze wandered around his face. This was an extremely handsome face. Other than the long and narrow phoenix eyes, the other parts were at least 50 to 60% similar to Xiang. Just by looking at this face, one could not deny the blood relationship between him and Xiang. Yu Pinyan's originally unhappy mood became even more gloomy as he used his thumb to push away the embroidered spring saber. The buzzing sound of the saber blade rubbing against the scabbard echoed in the hall. Not only was it sharp and ear-piercing, it also carried a trace of murderous aura. It scared Master Shui's family so much that their souls almost left their bodies. Shen Yuanqi heard the sound of his adopted brother's teeth chattering and his calm face showed a bit of helplessness. He extended his hand and invited, "May I ask Commandant Yu to step aside to speak?" Yu Pinyan slowly put the knife back and left with him without saying a word. Everyone in the Shui family let out a long sigh of relief, feeling as if they had been rescued from a hopeless situation. "Commandant Yu, please have some tea." Personally pouring a cup of hot tea for the imposing youth, Shen Yuanqi went straight to the point and said, "Since the domain chief is here, he must have investigated my background. That Shen Miaoqi must have been released from prison. He's really lucky." He sneered. There was no trace of worry on his face, only endless resentment. Yu Pinyan looked up and said indifferently, "I remember that she's your little sister." Shen Yuanqi shook his head, "This official remembers that you are her biological brother." After saying that, he couldn't help but laugh. To the cold-blooded Yu Pinyan, what did blood mean? If he wanted to find Shen Miaoqi, with the dragon scale guard in his hands, it would only take 3 to 4 days. However, he had searched for 4 whole years. It was enough to show that he did not care about Shen Miaoqi's life or death. If not for Xiang saving his life that year, how could he have such peaceful days today? Yu Pinyan had always been someone who did not recognize his own family. Seeing the youth's cold eyes sweep over, Shen Yuanqi quickly stopped laughing and slowly said, Domain Chief Darren does not need to use words to test me. I will tell Darren the truth. The current me and Shen Miaoqi do not have half a bit of friendship, only hatred. She caused the family Shen to collapse and I only resent her. However, she should not have stolen mother's life-saving money and ran away. Mother stayed in bed for 3 days before she passed away with hatred. I tried to close her eyes several times but was unable to. She really died with grievances. You did not know that on the day she left, mother had already passed me a message, asking me to ask for leave from Godfather and bring her to the capital to look for relatives. She said that it was to compensate her for the suffering she had suffered all these years. Suffering? When had she ever suffered any bit of suffering in my family? Speaking till here, Shen Yuanqi poured away the hot tea and replaced it with a cup of strong wine. He sneered and said, if I had known earlier, I would have sent her back even if I had to risk my life. It was also because father made a mistake and was afraid of your family's revenge, so he hid his tracks and fled back to Lingnan. Us merchants originally had low status and how could we afford to offend the nobles? If we were to let you find her, perhaps our entire family would lose their lives. Who would have thought that even if we did not let you find her, our family would still be ruined by her? Could this be retribution? Shen Yuanqi continuously drank 2 cups of strong wine and shook his head with a bitter smile. Domain Chief Darren does not know. Our family Shen is not completely without conscience. We knew that she was of noble birth and thus did not dare to neglect her. Since young, everything she ate and wore was the best. We also asked a teacher to carefully guide her and molded her in the direction of a noble lady. In terms of status, even her father had to lower his head in front of her. Now that I think about it, it was because of our indulgence that she was raised to have a heart higher than the sky and thus planted the root of the disaster early. Holding the empty wine cup in silence for a long time, Shen Yuanqi then recovered his calm and cupped his hands. This official forgot himself and caused Domain Chief Darren to laugh at me. Hearing that Shen Miaoqi had fallen into Darren's hands, this official thought that this day would come sooner or later. This official only wants to ask Darren one thing. What do you want to do with Xiang? As for this official, I asked Domain Chief Darren to be magnanimous and let this official off on the account that my family Shen has already been ruined. He was not someone who was greedy for life and afraid of death. However, Shen Miaoqi had returned and his younger sister's future was uncertain. He was really not at ease to die like this. Yu Pinyin glanced at him and said in an unkind tone, Ben Ho is not interested in taking your life. Moreover, Xiang is not someone you can call. He originally wanted to kill this person to cover up the past but changed his mind at the last moment. This person may still be of some use to him. Shen Yuanqi stared blankly and then nodded with a bitter smile. It is this official who has overstepped. How does Darren intend to settle Shen Miaoqi and how to deal with my younger sister? Yu Pinyin also poured away the tea and replaced it with a cup of strong wine. He drank it in one gulp and coldly said, Xiang is Ben Ho's younger sister. Saying that Xiang was not allowed and saying that her younger sister was not allowed, Commandant Yu's character was indeed as tyrannical and overbearing as the rumors. Shen Yuanqi thought for a moment and straightforwardly expressed his attitude. No matter how much power Darren has, he is unable to erase this official's blood relationship with Xiang in Second Young Mississippi. Now that Shen Miaoqi has been found by Darren, shouldn't Second Young Miss also be brought back to the family by this official? It is time for everyone to return to their respective places but not now. When he said this, Yu Pinyin's expression was particularly gloomy. Shen Yuanqi's chest surged with anger but also faintly felt joy. The anger was because family Yu had abandoned his younger sister and the joy was because he was able to reunite with his only family member. He took a few deep breaths to control his expression and asked, when is that? Yu Pinyin did not answer and put down the wine cup. Ben Ho came here to warn you. Without Ben Ho's permission, do not attempt to acknowledge Xiang and you are not allowed to have any contact with her. If you do not know what is good for you, Ben-ho has thousands of ways to make you and the Shui family completely disappear. When the time is right, Ben-ho will naturally send someone to inform you. Facing the famous king of hell who killed people like scything flax, Shen Yuanqi could only nod with a bitter smile. Moreover, if he rashly went to acknowledge Xiang, she would definitely not be willing to leave with him. In her heart, Prefecture Yu was her real family and Yu Pinyin was her biological older brother. And the one who took her away would become her enemy. He could not help but worry about this point. After Yu Pinyin returned to the Fu, he went directly to the main courtyard. Matriarch was currently dozing off on the couch. When she heard the sound of the curtain being lifted and Mama Ma paying her respects, Matriarch opened her eyes and smiled. "Yen, you're back. Come sit with old ancestor for a while." Yu Pinyin walked over to pour a cup of hot tea for Matriarch and said faintly, "Old ancestor, the person the Lin clan is looking for has been found a few days ago." At some point in time, Yu Pinyin no longer called the Lin clan his mother. Matriarch could tell that something was wrong, but there was nothing she could do. She could only frown slightly and ponder for a long time before she realized who the person the Lin clan was looking for was. She immediately sat up straight and asked anxiously, "You really found her? Where is she?" After searching for 4 years, Matriarch finally received definite news. She could not help but reveal an expression of ecstasy. In the end, this was her blood-related granddaughter. In the dead of night, she could not help but think of her. She would toss and turn restlessly in bed, her thoughts burning with worry. If her granddaughter did not live a good life and died outside, Matriarch would not have the face to see the family use ancestors even in the Yellow Springs. Yu Pinyin patted Matriarch's shoulder and said indifferently, "Old ancestor, do you still remember the servant girl who added charcoal and caused the crown princess to give birth prematurely? She is the person the Lin clan is looking for. It's her." Matriarch's joyful expression immediately faded and was replaced by fear and unease. "Old ancestor, do not worry. She has already been cleared of suspicion and has been sent to Shueiyuan nunnery by me. She is the servant girl of the eldest legitimate daughter of Yunzhou's prefectural magistrate, Zhao Anshuan. Once I've taken care of the Zhao clan, old ancestor will send someone to pick her up." How did she become the Zhao clan's servant girl? Matriarch's fear was mixed with a bit of astonishment. "I have a file with me. Old ancestor will understand once you finish reading it. Grandson still has to investigate the case, so I'll be going now." Yu Pinyin asked the imperial bodyguard to bring the file over and then left. When he reached the door, he seemed to think of something. He turned around and cautiously said, "Xiang still has an older brother who is currently in the capital. Grandson has already warned that person, he definitely won't dare to come to our door to look for her. In the future, grandmother will send people to watch Xiang, don't let her meet that person." Although the old lady didn't understand, she also felt that what he said was right. Xiang couldn't be given to other families, so she agreed without hesitation. When the guard brought the file, she couldn't wait to read it. Mama Ma also leaned over to take a look. Her eyes were as wide as copper bells, and she kept chanting Buddhist scriptures. After reading it, the two of them sighed at the same time. This is really a sin. She already knew that her granddaughter was a jinx, but she didn't expect her fate to be so bad. The first time she jinxed her family Shen, the second time she jinxed her family Shen, the third time she jinxed her father's death, the fourth time she jinxed her mother's death, and the fifth time she jinxed Shen Yuanqi to become a slave, his future ruined. The caravan that met her was robbed by bandits, killed, and scattered. Zhao Anshuan, who met her, had his promotion opportunity snatched away in the blink of an eye. The crown princess, who met her, was immediately born prematurely and narrowly escaped death. Wherever she went, she jinxed everything. She could be called a mobile source of disaster. What was even more frightening was that she and Upinion had only met twice, and both times she was involved in the disaster of being sentenced to prison. The first time was fine, but the second time was extremely dangerous. If something happened to the crown princess and the little imperial grandson, she would shout out her identity in prison, and her family would also be finished. The old lady leaned on the couch and rubbed her temples. In her mind, she kept recalling Master Kuhai's judgment. Everything really came true. Siblings can't coexist when they fight. This jinx really did come to fight with Yandere for fate. She narrowly avoided it this time, but what about the next time? What about the time after that? Fate was somewhat illusory, and she could temporarily ignore it. But more importantly, her granddaughter's character didn't seem good. She abandoned her mother, whom she had raised for 14 years, and even took away her mother's life-saving money. The kindness of raising her was greater than the kindness of giving birth to her. No matter what the family Shen did wrong, they still raised her. She lived a life of luxury, had a group of servants, and didn't lack anything. Even when the family went bankrupt, she didn't lose out at all. Instead, she let her own son sell himself as a slave to continue providing for her, and even risked his life to send her home. Her actions this time could even be said to be cruel and unscrupulous. If such a person were to be brought home, who knew how much trouble it would cause? The old lady fiercely massaged her temples, and fell into an unprecedented struggle. The author has something to say. Ahem, I heard that if you buy it on a computer or a phone, the author gets a different cut. If you buy it on a computer, you get 20% more. I'm handing over the house at the end of the year, and there's still a few decades of mortgage to pay. Dai, who is so short of money that he's going crazy, begs all of you to give me 20% more if it's convenient. Of course, everything is still based on your convenience _. Also, I want to thank my cute little creatures and all of my friends who supported the original version. Mwax. Chapter 44. Just as the matriarch was feeling a severe headache, Wan Qiu lifted the curtain and anxiously shouted, "The old lady, bad news. Madam committed suicide by drowning herself. You should go and take a look." What? Suicide by drowning herself? Is she dead? The matriarch jumped in fright and almost rolled off the bed. Fortunately, Mama Kim found her early and saved her in time. She's still unconscious and talking nonsense. Wan Qiu squatted down and helped the matriarch put on her shoes. The matriarch didn't wait for him to finish putting on her shoes before leaving. She thought angrily, "One caused a huge disaster outside and almost caused my marquis household to be confiscated and stripped of my title. The other committed suicide at home and almost caused Yandere's reputation to fall to the ground. This mother and daughter pair really came to collect debts." Yu Xiang arrived at the main room a step ahead of them. Although she had no feelings for the Lin clan, she was still the daughter of the Lin clan in name. Moreover, she was in charge of the entire prefecture Yu. She couldn't pretend that she didn't hear the news when the servants reported it, so she had no choice but to make this trip. The Lin clan member was lying on the bed on the verge of death. The bruises on her face hadn't subsided, and the red bruise on her neck was very shocking. Her eyes were tightly shut, and she was shaking her head while talking nonsense. Yu Xiang tilted her head and listened. She was saying, "Daughter, where are you, daughter?" Yu Xiang didn't treat herself as an outsider. Moreover, she still didn't know that she wasn't of prefecture Yu blood. Thus, she ordered the servants to call a doctor as she sneered with a heart as dead as ashes. "I'm clearly right by your side. Why do you keep calling me your daughter? You even committed suicide because of this? You don't want me to have a good time even if you die, right? If you really love me and care about me, why don't you turn around and look at me? You usually treat me like I don't exist, so why do you keep calling me when you're unconscious? What are you thinking? Why don't you tell me clearly?" She naturally knew which daughter the Lin clan was calling, but that didn't stop her from being angry at the Lin clan's actions. She died and everything would be over. She left behind such a mess, yet her brother had to clean it up. If one or two unpleasant rumors leaked out, who knew how many people would stab her brother with a knife? Thinking of this, she couldn't restrain her anger. She used her horsewhip to hit the bedding beside the Lin clan's bedding, and the muffled sounds of slapping echoed in the room. Nanny Jean was Mrs. Lin's escort. She was afraid that she would really hit her master, so she hurriedly ran over to stop her. "Second miss, madam is your mother. It's fine if you don't feel sorry for her, but why are you blaming her?" She knew about Yuxiang's family background. Therefore, her tone was filled with disdain and contempt, without the slightest bit of respect. "I'm the master, and you're the servant. You're talking about treason with me? I want to teach you what it means to respect your superiors." Yuxiang pushed her away and angrily shouted at the unconscious Lin clan, "Even if you want to die, don't choose such an undignified way to die. Do you know how many people are watching the Marquis household now? Do you know how well my brother looks on the surface, but how difficult it is behind the scenes? It's fine if you die, but if people seize the opportunity to attack my brother, then his career will be ruined. He only got to where he is today by risking his life. Every step he takes is bleeding. Do you think it's easy for him? Even if you don't love him, don't always add to his troubles, okay? I'm begging you. My brother doesn't owe you anything. On the contrary, it's you who haven't fulfilled your responsibility as a mother. If you still have a little bit of conscience, I'm begging you to live peacefully, okay? I'm begging you, okay?" The more she spoke, the more agitated and angry she became. She continued to whip the Lin clan's bedding with her horsewhip until the silk bedsheets were torn apart. They were all commanders. Since ancient times, how many people who occupied this position had a good ending? That position was like a murderous knife in the emperor's hand. Once it was blunted, it would be ruthlessly abandoned. She lived every day in fear and trepidation. No matter what she said or did, she would always think and calculate, for fear that the prefecture would make a mistake and bring disaster to her brother. However, these two people were all blockheads. They were only afraid that her brother wouldn't die quickly enough. When the matriarch arrived, she saw Yu Pinyin standing at the door and listening attentively. He must have received the news before he could leave and hurried over. She slowly walked over and happened to hear Yuxiang's heart-wrenching complaints. Her heart trembled along with it. In the entire Fu, Xiang'er was the one who understood the situation the most. Her brother protected her like the apple of his eye. This affection was not in vain. She also treated her brother as her lifeblood. Whatever she did, she always put her brother first and did not consider for herself at all. The matriarch's anxious heart finally received a bit of comfort. She turned her face to look at her grandson. Sure enough, she found a trace of tenderness in his eyes. Inside the room, Mama Kim did not dare to approach. She could only kneel down and kowtow to Yuxiang, "Second young miss, Furen is already like this. Please be merciful and let her go. This old woman also begs you to let go of my prefecture you. Don't torment her anymore, okay?" The matriarch used her walking stick to enter the room and walked to the bedside to feel the pulse of the Lin clan. She heaved a sigh of relief. It's good that she didn't die. Yu Pinyin took the horsewhip from his younger sister's hand and stroked her slightly red eyes. He comforted, "Xiang'er, don't be angry. There is no need to bicker with her. What was Shen Miaoqi? What was the Lin clan? This was his true family. A family that wholeheartedly thought of him." Yu Xiang threw herself into his arms and sobbed, "Older brother, I just feel sorry for you. If she really died, I don't know how many people will poke at your spine. If this reaches the emperor's ears." She simply did not dare to think too deeply. Don't look at how older brother wanted to be awe-inspiring and no one dared to provoke him. That was because he handled things flawlessly. If there was a day where there was a mistake, based on the many political enemies under him, they would group together and attack him. If the emperor was also dissatisfied with older brother's situation would be dangerous. One must know that the Lin clan was not like those uncles who were unjust and killed. The Lin clan was older brother's birth mother. If she hanged herself and someone with ulterior motives made up a few words, wouldn't older brother end up with the infamy of forcing birth mother to death, worse than a beast? This was more serious than not recognizing his own family. The emperor dared to use older brother because he valued his impartial and ruthless methods. But if older brother really did not recognize his own birth mother, would the emperor be at ease? Her heart became more and more unsettled. After being pulled into Yupinyan's arms, she couldn't help but cling tightly to him. She buried her face in the hollow of his neck and continuously inhaled the sandalwood scent that made her feel even more at ease. Only then did she feel a little better. The scorching hot air caused goosebumps to appear all over his skin. Yupinyan didn't show it on his face, but he couldn't help but tighten his arms around his younger sister. He tilted his head slightly and used his lips to rub the top of her fragrant hair. Amidst the intense emotions churning in his chest, there was not a trace of worry for the Lin clan. There was only endless joy. It was enough that there was someone in this world who treated him as her life. He didn't have any other extravagant requests. Seeing that the Lin clan was about to wake up, the matriarch had many things to say to her, but it wasn't convenient for her granddaughter to hear. She waved her hand at her grandson and said, "Yandere, send your younger sister back." Because all of her attention was on the Lin clan, she didn't notice the strong emotions in her grandson's eyes. Yupinyan agreed in a hoarse voice. He patted his younger sister's back and carried her out. Once the two of them were far away, the matriarch picked up a cup of cold tea from the table and directly splashed it on the Lin clan's face. She loudly shouted, "Lin clan, get up." The Lin clan was already about to wake up. This splash of tea just happened to open her eyes. She immediately began to cry, "Mother, why are you still saving me? Let me die. It's already been 4 years and we still haven't found her. My daughter must have met with misfortune. I also don't want to live anymore." When her husband died, she had thought of committing suicide, but at that time, she didn't have the courage. She could only rely on her hatred for Wuxia, for the bandits, for the unfairness of fate, and even for the matriarch and Yupinyan to survive. But in the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. That rootless hatred had more or less dissipated. Her heart became more and more empty. When she looked back, she discovered that her children and the matriarch had already been pushed far away. They could no longer approach her. Just as she was feeling completely disheartened, the news that Wuxia wasn't the descendant of the Marquis household came. She still had a daughter who was wandering outside, waiting for her to save her. Like a ghost walking in the endless darkness, she finally saw a ray of light leading her to heaven. She threw herself at it without any regard for her life. But she walked, and waited for another 4 years. She was already exhausted and couldn't hold on any longer. Even though she knew that her death would stir up rumors in the manor, even though she knew that her unsightly death would cause her family to discover clues and bring trouble to her family, she didn't care about any of it. She just wanted to quickly go down to accompany her husband and daughter. She didn't want to be burdened by living in this world. The matriarch was so angry that her breathing became uneven. She clutched her chest and coughed violently. If she had a whip in her hand, she wouldn't have been as polite as Xiang'er. She would have already lashed the Lin clan's face. Wan Qiu fed her a bottle of honeydew and repeatedly patted her back. Only then did she regain her strength. She said word by word, "I didn't save you. If I could, I wouldn't be able to choke you to death with my own hands." Seeing the Lin clan's heartbroken expression, she continued, "You don't have to seek death. Let me tell you, your daughter has been found. If you're willing to live peacefully, I'll take her back to the manor another day. Could it be that the family you really owed this mother and daughter in her previous life, so she came to collect her debt in this life? If she didn't cause chaos in the family they wouldn't be able to live peacefully, right? She couldn't think about it. Once she thought about it, her heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys would hurt everywhere. The matriarch rubbed her chest, her expression extremely ugly. The Lin clan stared at her in shock and anxiously asked, "My daughter has been found. Where is she? Quickly take me to see her. Hurry up." She screamed hysterically, struggling to get off the bed as she screamed. The matriarch hit her back with her walking stick and angrily said, "She's been placed outside. You stay here obediently. I'll only take you to see her after she recovers. Otherwise, don't even think about seeing her in this lifetime." The Lin clan became obedient and hurriedly pulled the blanket to cover herself. She cried and laughed as she said, "Mother, don't worry. I'll definitely recover as soon as possible." Is she alright?" "She's very well. None of those who met her were well. Didn't you see how Shin Yuanqi was almost at the end of his life as a slave when he was with her? Once he left her, his slave status was removed and he became the top scholar." The matriarch sneered in her heart, but her face revealed some displeasure. She continued, "I also have to warn you. Even if she comes back, Xiang'er is still the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household. If you want the scandal of your daughter living in the Shang family to be known by everyone, then you can only mistreat Xiang'er so that outsiders can see clearly." "I won't. Daughter-in-law understands the severity of this matter. Mother, please don't worry." Now that the backbone of the family had been found, the Lin clan had also recovered some of their sanity. When they spoke, their expressions seemed to vaguely resemble their shrewd and capable self. The matriarch stared at her for a moment, then hurriedly left without waiting for the doctor to treat her. The group of people gradually disappeared into the distance. Yu came out from behind the rockery where she was hiding, a malicious smile on her lips. After waiting for so many years, the real phoenix has finally returned. The pheasant should be about to drop the parasol tree soon, right? The author has something to say, "You guys really sent me away a lot." The broken bowl clanked loudly. "Love you guys to death, Mwax." Tianya Si Ko threw a landmine, throwing time Mother Gua through a landmine, throwing time temporary silence through a landmine, throwing time chatter through a landmine, throwing time Aershin through a landmine, throwing time Li Yi through a landmine, throwing time Mother Gua through a hand grenade, throwing time hidden fragrance attack through a landmine, throwing time I love furry through a landmine, throwing time a bunch of lotus through a landmine, throwing time Luo Qing Tian through a hand grenade, throwing time Yang Lu Dui Yen through a landmine, throwing time Yun Do Zi through a hand grenade, throwing time Tsuanyo through a landmine, throwing time Shaolinzi 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 through a landmine, throwing time Chaoga Shiyen through a landmine, throwing time. Chapter 45. Yu Pinyin first entered the palace and informed the emperor that Shen Miaoqi had been a servant in the Zhao family for 4 years. He then expressed that he needed to take care of the Zhao family and cover up this scandal. The emperor was not interested in his family matters and was very pleased with his honesty. After sighing for a while, he waved his hand and transferred Zhao and Shun to the wealthiest Yangzhou. Not long after, many people would die in Yangzhou and Yangzhou's officialdom would be empty. This Zhao and Shun was upright and outspoken, impartial and selfless. He was a useful person. Yu Pinyin obtained the emperor's permission and went to the Zhao family. Zhao and Shun always had the reputation of Zhao Qing Tian in Yunzhou. After hearing his intentions, he took the initiative to say that he would help the Marquis household keep it a secret and would not easily destroy a child's future. As for the matter of transferring to Yangzhou, he immediately refused and was very angry about it, feeling that his character was insulted. Yu Pinyin had a good impression of Zhao and Shun's family and knew that Shen Miaoqi had never suffered any grievances in his family. Although Shen Miaoqi's luck was a bit worse, but the people she met were all sincere towards her. First, it was the family Shen who was obedient, and then the Zhao family who saved her life. That Miss Zhao never treated her as a servant and instead called her a sister. She treated her the same as her own and treated her like a deputy. Mississippi. Shen Miaoqi knew that her identity was not ordinary, so she was not willing to sign a death contract with the Zhao family but signed a living contract every year. It was reasonable to say that this kind of servant would not be valued by the master. But Father Shen was very indulgent towards her and was even willing to take her along when he was doing business. Thus she knew how to observe people's expressions and win over people's hearts at a young age. That Miss Zhao was coaxed by her within a few days and treated her as a close friend. After hearing about her background, she personally came to the front hall and promised that she would never speak of Kai Chi's, Shen Miaoqi's, secret, or else she would be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Yu Pinyin was very satisfied with the tactfulness of the Zhao family, and Shen Miaoqi did not sign a death contract, so she was not registered as a servant and did not need to go to the household registration department. As for Zhao Anshuan's promotion, he did not mention it again. Once the imperial edict was issued, Zhao Anshuan would not be able to refuse it even if he wanted to. She only hoped that he would not be blinded by the vanity of the Tu Huai, and that he would properly guard this peaceful and prosperous age for the emperor and the crown prince. The matriarch learned from her grandson that the Zhao family had been properly arranged. She also saw that the marks on the Lin clan's necks had disappeared. These past few days, she had been clamoring to see her daughter. After thinking it over, she felt that it would be good to let them see each other first, so that they wouldn't be restless and create more trouble. The members of the Lin clan changed out of the plain clothes that they had worn for 14 years and put on a gold-threaded, butterfly-patterned dress. They tidied themselves up and went to meet their daughter in high spirits. As soon as they stepped out of the fu, someone immediately reported the news to Yu Xiang. "Oh, you look so happy. Are you sure?" Yu Xiang was building a pot of fiery red roses. "I'm sure. She doesn't even wear plain clothes anymore. She's wearing a red, golden-laid dress. She's even saying things like, 'I miss my daughter so much.'" A very unremarkable-looking servant girl solemnly swore. Yu Xiang carelessly cut off a beautifully blooming rose. Holding the stem, she waved her hand and said, "It's fine. You can leave." She knew what she should know, and she also knew what she should not know. As a result, she did not place people around the Lin clan. She only bribed a few low-level servant girls to guard against the Lin clan's mischief. However, after today, she was afraid that she would have to add a few more nails. This prefecture Yu was about to change. Lu stuffed 2 taels of silver into the servant girl's hands and ordered her to quietly leave through the corner gate. When she came back, she asked curiously, "Miss, Madam hasn't smiled or left the house in 14 years. What do you think is wrong with her today? Could it be that hanging herself has enlightened her brain? It's not that she's enlightened, but that she has a backbone. Once a person has a backbone, their mental state will naturally change." Yu Xiang plucked the rose petals one by one into the bowl. Although she had a smile on her face, her eyes were very cold. Lu quietly sized up her expression and did not dare to ask again. In the blink of an eye, 4 years had passed. Yu Xiang had a premonition that the main character was about to return. Her initial indifferent attitude was now replaced by apprehension. She did not covet anything from the family Yu. She only wanted to stay by Yu Pinyin's side. She was originally a ghost. If it wasn't for Yu Pinyin, she would not be at ease to take root in this strange world. If the main character returned and she left, it would be the same as digging out her roots while she was still alive. Sooner or later, she would slowly wither and die. She was not weak, but she liked to live by Yu Pinyin's side. She felt at ease and happy. At that time, she magnanimously said that she would return to her own place. But when it came to it, she found that if anyone dared to snatch her older brother, she would fight with them. Although the family Shen were her blood relatives, they had never raised her. Why should she willingly leave with them when they came? Did she have any feelings for them? She used a small hammer to smash the petals and poured the bright red flower juice into a mixture of beeswax, lard, and spices. She then stuck a finger on it and smeared it evenly on her lips in front of the bronze mirror. Her fierce red lips quietly blossomed into a sweet but gloomy smile. Other than her older brother, the main character could have anything she wanted. In this lifetime, her older brother could only belong to her. As for the family Shen, they could go back to where they came from. Although she did not care for the Marquis household's power and unparalleled wealth, she cared for her older brother. As long as she could be together with her older brother, even if the future was dangerous, even if the fate was unpredictable, even if the birds were to die and the bow was to be confiscated, she would still be willing. Hearing that Shen Miaoqi was temporarily staying at Shuiyu Nunnery, the old madam sent a confidant mama to teach her various etiquette. At this time, the sky was drizzling with fine raindrops and the air was very humid. After inhaling, it brought a sticky and suffocating feeling. Shen Miaoqi had already knelt for the 47th time and still did not kneel properly. She still had to do it for the 48th time. Her knees, thighs and fibula were all in great pain and she wanted to find a soft couch to lie down immediately. Shen Miaoqi's face did not have any complaints and only obediently apologized to the mama and did it again. The mama was very satisfied with her and there was a trace of happiness on her stern face. She thought that she was indeed the daughter of the first wife of the Marquis household. Her arrogance and elegance had long been integrated into her blood. Compared to Miss Xiang, she was not worse, just lacking a bit of dignity. But for a young lady from a noble family, what was the use of having a dignified bearing? This was already enough. Shen Miaoqi followed the rules and slowly knelt down. This time, her posture was indeed perfect. Hearing the mama's praise, her tense face relaxed slightly and she sat down to rest. She was not afraid of hardship or tiredness. Even if it was 10 times or 100 times harder, she could endure it. She was only afraid that family Yu would throw her into the nunnery and not care about her. Now that family Yu had sent a mama to teach her the rules, she was at ease. This meant that family Yu did not have any intention of abandoning her. From a young age, she had heard Shen Fu and Shen Mu constantly mention that she was a noble person. She originally thought that they were talking about her future fate and thus had an unusual yearning for glory and wealth. But it was not until that day that she knew that she was originally a noble person. It was the family Yu who stole her noble status and instead sent her own daughter to live a life of luxury. All her unwillingness turned into hatred and she did not hesitate to leave that home and head to the capital. 14 years of suffering was not worth mentioning. If it was possible, she would do all she could to erase all the stains from her past. Fortunately, Shen Fu had already passed away and Shen Mu would not be able to last for more than a few days. Shen Yuanqi was still staying in Lingnan as a servant. The pressure on her body was instantly reduced by more than half, leaving only Zhao family and that lowly spawn in the Marquis family. She needed to personally deal with that lowly spawn but Zhao family was a bit difficult to deal with. But an arm could not wring a thigh. With family Yu's power, dealing with a Zhao family without any foundation should not be a problem, right? Thinking of this, she looked at the old mama and asked, "Qin mama, what does my older brother do?" Mama Qin took out a few plasters and applied them on Ji Yunshu's leg. She lowered her voice and said, "Your older brother is the commander-in-chief. The entire Han dynasty only listens to His Majesty's orders. Not to mention the first and second rank officials, even the supreme princes and dukes have to bow down when they see him." It's this. Shen Miaoqi's heart was beating wildly. She completely did not think that Yu Pinyin had such a high position. Even though the family Shen was wealthy, but compared to the aristocratic families, it was much worse. This caused Shen Miaoqi's vision to be narrow and her knowledge was not high. She did not understand what the commander did but grasped the most important information. She was now one of the top noble ladies in the Han dynasty. She finally obtained the high and mighty life that she had always dreamed of. Even though there were many haze and flaws in this life, it did not matter. She believed that with her own methods, she would be able to get rid of them one by one. Taking out the handkerchief from her collar, she used an extremely elegant posture to cover the sneer on her lips. Just at this time, a nun outside the door said, "Benefactor Shen, someone came to see you. Please move to the main hall." Qin Mama was very happy when she heard this and smiled, "Young miss, quickly change your clothes. It must be the old lady and Furen who came to see you." Shen Miaoqi was at a loss for a moment and quickly tidied up her hair. She then took out the most appropriate dress from the chest and hurriedly changed into it. Miaoqi greets Zumo, greets mother. Just as she entered the hall, she gracefully bowed and displayed the elegant bearing that she had learned from Qin Mama to the extreme. 14 years old was the most tender age and in addition, she looked like the Lin clan. Even though her appearance was not peerless, it was as gentle as water. Her eyebrows were faint and she looked very clean. The Lin clan's eyes lit up and rushed over to pull her into their embrace and started crying, "My pitiful daughter, mother finally saw you. You left for 14 years. Mother missed you so much that her liver and intestines were broken and she almost could not live. Mother, daughter also missed you." Shen Miaoqi plunged into the arms of this luxuriously dressed woman without any trace of restraint or awkwardness. It was as if the 14 years of separation was just an illusion. The old lady thanked the nun who led the way and sat down on the seat of honor. She used a dark and unfathomable gaze to size up the crying mother and daughter. This mother and daughter, no matter if it was their appearance or mannerisms, they were all 80 to 90% similar. If an outsider were to see them, they would definitely praise them as a weak willow in the wind, delicate and pitiful. However, in the old lady's eyes, it became annoying. One crying face in the family was already enough. Now there was another one. Perhaps when she was young, she admired this kind of woman and felt that gentle and graceful were more moving. Otherwise, she would not have chosen the Lin clan for her son. However, as the years went by and the world changed, she gradually felt that a woman like Xiang, who was as passionate as fire, was more likable. When she was with her, no matter how difficult it was, she would not feel tired. Unlike these two. It was obviously a happy occasion, but why did it look like their parents had died? Thinking of this, the old lady hurriedly spat and secretly complained to Buddha about her misspoken words. In fact, the old lady could not be blamed for being too biased. Anyone who was tortured by a crying face for 14 years would have their nerves become quite fragile. The author has something to say, "Thank you to my little cute creatures and also thank all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi." Chapter 46. After enduring for half an hour, seeing that the mother and daughter were crying non-stop, the old lady finally spoke, "All right, today is a joyous day, what are you crying for? Quickly sit down and wipe your face. Let us grandparent and grandchild have a good chat." Shen Miaoqi then wiped her tears and helped the Lin clan to sit down. She then knelt on the praying mat and kowtowed to the two elders to serve tea, doing all the etiquette perfectly. The old lady was satisfied with this and her stern face softened slightly. She took a sip of tea and waved her hand, "Don't kneel, get up. Have you been well these past few days? Has the injury on your hand healed? How is your learning of the rules?" Replying to grandmother, Qin Momo has taken very good care of granddaughter. Granddaughter has been living very well recently, eating well and sleeping sweetly. It is just that she misses you very much. The injury on my hand has already healed and only a few scars are left. I think it will slowly fade in the future. Speaking to this point, she folded her hands and tried to cover up the scars left behind by the punishment. Qin Momo smiled and continued, replying to the old lady, young miss learns very quickly. It has only been 6 days and this servant has nothing more to teach. The old lady nodded slightly, but the Lin clan jumped up and held their daughter's hands and asked, "How did you get injured? Who did it? Tell mother, mother will let your older brother help you seek justice. Wasn't this caused by opinion?" Moreover, Shen Miaoqi really did not want to mention that prison sentence. She secretly glanced at the old lady and shook her head with red eyes. "Mother, do not worry. This injury was caused by daughter's carelessness. No one bullied daughter." "Really? Really?" The mother and daughter hugged each other and cried bitterly, causing the old lady to frown. Not only did she not feel gratified that Shen Miaoqi helped her grandson to cover it up, but it also evoked the taboo of fate that was buried deep in her heart, and her mood became gloomy. Also, who did she learn this bad habit of crying after a few sentences? In the end, she was the daughter of the Lin clan, and it was inevitable that there would be some similarities. After seeing so many candid and bright Yuxiang, the old lady really could not appreciate such a sentimental girl. Moreover, she was old and could not stand the noise. She really wanted to leave the mother and daughter alone. After enduring for a moment, she opened her mouth to interrupt the two. "Miaoqi, how have you been these 14 years? Did the family Shen treat you?" Even though there were detailed records in the file, she still wanted to hear her granddaughter's explanation. It finally came. Shen Miaoqi used the interval between wiping her tears to recite the speech that she had already prepared in her heart. That day, Yu Pinyin did not say a single word of nonsense to her, nor did he ask her how she had been for the past 14 years. She was indeed relieved, but at the same time, she felt rather dissatisfied. She heaved a sigh of relief because she knew that even if the Shen family had wronged her in the first place, her behavior was also very reprehensible. She could not tell outsiders about it. If Yu Pinyin really asked her about it, she really did not dare to lie in front of him. She was dissatisfied because Yu Pinyin did not care about her at all. She clenched her tear-stained handkerchief and slowly opened her mouth, replying to grandmother, "Granddaughter has been suffering for these 14 years. At first, the Shen family treated me well. But after the disaster 4 years ago, they lost all their wealth and gradually became worse. If I didn't hear Mother Shen talking to her son about my background, I wouldn't have known that my family was still thousands of miles away. I was afraid that they would sell me to a large family as a slave or servant. I had no choice but to steal my childhood swaddling clothes to escape. I rushed all the way to the capital but met with bandits. I narrowly escaped death. Fortunately, I was saved by Zhao Daren's family. That is how we met today." She picked up her handkerchief to wipe her tears. She omitted what she should, concealed what she should, and distorted what she should. She directly molded herself into an orphan girl who had traveled thousands of miles to find her family and suffered hardships. This caused Mrs. Lin to cry bitterly again. She hugged her and scolded the Shen family for being wicked. If not for the fact that Zhao and Shen's family was in the capital, Shen Miaoqi also wanted to arrange the Zhao family so that the Marquis household would dispose of the Zhao family. Old Lady Tai Tai looked at her deeply and gently twirled her prayer beads. Mama Ma, who was standing at the side, secretly shook her head. She thought that a Shang clan girl was indeed a Shang clan girl. This nature of seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages was deeply rooted in her bone marrow. Not only did she cheat the family Shen, she also stepped on them a few times and removed herself completely. It was not a bad thing to have scheming methods. However, the bad thing was that this scheming method was not used in the right place. Even the family Shen who raised her could be slandered and abandoned as she wished. Wouldn't she be even colder to the family Yu who did not have any accumulated feelings for her? Even if she brought her back, old Lady Tai Tai would not be able to open her heart to her. Moreover, she had such a fate. She did not know what the dragon scale guard did for a living. Otherwise, she would not put on such a show. Thinking of this, Mama Ma looked at Mistress and saw that she was indeed tired. She lightly waved her hand. All right, the past is already in the past. It is good that she is back. You should speak less about the Lin clan. I am tired and will go to the rear hall to discuss Buddhism with Great Master Fu Hui. You two can stay behind and talk about your personal matters. The Lin clan and Shen Miao Qi could not ask for more and quickly sent her to the door. Because of the 3 family members that she met, only the Lin clan was the closest to her. Shen Miao Qi naturally had to win over the Lin clan first. Moreover, she inquired many times but did not understand the situation of the prefecture Yu from Qin Momo. She only thought that the prefecture Yu was the same as other families and that the matters of the inner residence were all decided by the matriarch. Therefore, she was more attentive to the Lin clan. The mother and daughter pair snuggled together and talked for a while. Shen Miao Qi probed, "Mother, I was forced to be a servant in the Zhao family for 4 years. If this matter was spread out, would the Marquis family lose face? My child, you do not need to worry. Your older brother has already taken care of this matter properly." The Lin clan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and softly said, "That Zhao and Shun can be considered to have taken advantage of the heavens. Your older brother gave him a position in Lianghuai and the whole family will move to Yangzhou in a few days. They will not be able to return for 4 to 5 years. If he says 1 or 2 unpleasant words, your older brother will definitely make him fall miserably no matter how high he climbs, ending up with a broken family. How would he dare? Then what about 4 to 5 years later? Yangzhou is not far from the capital." Shen Miao Qi pretended to be ignorant and said. In her opinion, it would be best to clean up all the people who knew about this matter or send them far away to Yunzhou and not allow them to enter the capital for the rest of their lives. Even though she did not understand politics, she knew that Yangzhou was the most prosperous place in the Great Han Dynasty. Wouldn't it be too convenient for Zhao and Shun to be an official there? Especially Zhao Jin. She had tolerated her for 4 years and could not bear to see her rely on herself to gain riches and honor. 4 to 5 years later, transfer to another place. In short, I will not let his family leak out your matter. Fortunately, that Zhao and Shun is an upright person and did not make excessive demands. The Lin clan patted their daughter's back. Shen Miao Qi's heart was filled with dissatisfaction but she could not say it. No matter how unaccomplished Zhao and Shun was, he was still a 4th-ranked court official. She was a weak female and would not be able to deal with him. However, her relationship with Yu Pinyin was indifferent and she did not have any hopes so she could only endure for the time being. Fortunately, even though the Lin clan had not met her face to face for 14 years, their feelings for her were very deep. This was the most fortunate thing. With the support of the mistress of the household, she would be able to mix well in the Marquis household within a few days. Yu Pinyin was awe-inspiring outside and had monstrous power. Once he returned to the Marquis household, wouldn't he have to listen to the Lin clan's orders? She was secretly pleased and asked, "Mother, if I go back, what will happen to the family Shen and daughter? Every time I mention her, there is a ball of fire in my heart. If it was not for the family Shen being so wicked to send that star of death in, how would your father die? How would we, mother and daughter, be forced to be separated for 14 years? The Lin clan's expression was ferocious and her tone was bitter. Seeing her daughter shrink back, she quickly smiled and comforted her, but in order to cover up your past, I had no choice but to keep her. To the outside world, I would only say that you two are twin sisters and because your 8 characters were weak, I sent you to the temple to be fostered. Even if it's for your sake, I have to swallow this anger. These days, it was common for twins to not survive. Children who were sent to the temple because their 8 characters were weak could be found everywhere. Moreover, the family was afraid that the gods would take the children to the underworld and would usually keep it a secret until they passed their death. Only then would they be brought back to the family tree. The excuse that the matriarch could come up with at that time was not completely baseless. If it was set out, at least 70 to 80% of the people would believe it. The rest would only have some suspicions because of the two people's different appearances. However, twins with different appearances were not rare in the Great Han Dynasty and could not be considered a big mistake. The Lin clan could swallow this anger, but Shen Miaoqi could not. As long as she thought that the lowly child who stole her status and wealth would continue to stay in the marquis household to enjoy life, she felt that her heart was ruthlessly torn apart by a sharp claw. Every piece of her heart was engraved with a strong hatred. Why was she so lucky? Just because she blocked 2 knives for Yupinian? Was 14 years of extravagant clothing and food not enough to repay? She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, 2 streams of tears fell. Mother, I suffered for her in the family Shen. Instead, she had a clear conscience and took the honor that should have belonged to me. Could it be that she could not be sent to the countryside with the excuse of being sick? Daughter's heart feels uncomfortable when she sees her. When she went to the countryside, she had plenty of means to deal with that lowly child. Because Shen Miaoqi had long seen that the Lin clan hated Yuxiang, she dared to say these words. If it was in front of the matriarch and Yupinian, she did not dare to even mention half a word. The Lin clan was moved when they heard this and nodded. This is a good idea. Wait for mother to go back and think it over for a few days before speaking to your grandmother. You do not know how much your grandmother and older brother spoil that star of misfortune. Their words revealed extreme dissatisfaction. Shen Miaoqi nodded aggrievedly. On this side, the mother and daughter finished discussing. On the other side, the matriarch left to call the Lin clan back. The Lin clan was extremely unwilling and pleaded, Mother, let's bring her back home today. No. The matriarch directly refused, wait for me to talk to Xiang before bringing her back. My daughter can go back whenever she wants to. Why do you need to inform her? The Lin clan was so angry that their faces turned white. Shen Miaoqi secretly clenched her handkerchief. The matriarch's mouth scolded, but her eyes were full of smiles. Xiang, her girl's personality is fierce and her brain is also extremely intelligent. If she did not know, she would bring her back, and with a few words, she would be able to clean Miaoqi's background. If you do not want her to cause unrest in the household, then go back today. I will not stop you. Finishing her words, she ordered people to pack up. These years, the Lin clan had suffered a few losses in the hands of Yuxiang. Everyone was afraid that she would cry, but Yuxiang was not afraid. She held a plate of melon seeds and watched her as if she was a clown. She could not help but want to expose her identity several times, but was blocked by her due to a freak combination of factors. She was almost angered to death. But the matriarch and Yupinian were always on her side, pressuring her to the point that she could not lift her head. The Lin clan hated Yuxiang very much. In this hatred, there was a trace of undetectable fear. Hearing the matriarch's words, they could only silently nod their heads. Shen Miaoqi also nodded her head. Her expression was very obedient, but she secretly raised her guard against Yuxiang. It seemed that this lowly child was not easy to deal with. She needed to be cautious when she went back. The author has something to say. Thank you to my little adorable creatures, and also thank all the friends who supported the original novel. 100 hot kisses for you. Chapter 47. In the evening, the old madam and the Lin clan entered the manor. Yuxiang had already prepared dinner and was waiting in the side hall. Yupinian had also returned and was playing with his sister's hand. His deep eyes revealed an imperceptible gentleness. Let's have dinner together. The old madam looked at the Lin clan. Thank you, mother. I'll go back and eat by myself. The Lin clan was so angry that they couldn't eat when they saw Yuxiang. Fortunately, their daughter would be back soon. In the future, there would be someone to accompany her no matter what she did. The old madam was just being polite. If she really agreed, she would feel uncomfortable. She didn't ask her to stay and waved her away. "Old ancestor, where did you take mother today?" She looked very happy. "I haven't seen her smile in 14 years. Yuxiang smiled brightly at the old madam. Her black and white cat eyes sparkled. When the old madam saw her granddaughter's tender and beautiful face, her heart felt like it was filled with a bucket of honey. She walked over and patted the top of her head. She jokingly said, "You haven't seen her in 14 years. Could it be that this little girl started remembering things the moment she was born? You're really the reincarnation of a spiritual child. Maybe I'm really one. Old ancestor, hurry up and eat. Don't let the skewers get cold." Yuxiang gestured for the servants to serve the rice. The old madam believed her granddaughter's words based on her intelligence. She couldn't help but smile even more happily. The atmosphere when the three of them gathered together was indeed different. Even the air was filled with joy. Mama Ma attentively served them food and then left with a smile. After seeing the Lin clans and Miss Miao Chi's sad faces for so long, her heart was already flustered. She still needed to look at Miss Xiang, more to wash her eyes. The old madam picked up a piece of roast goose for her granddaughter and slowly said, "Xiang, I have something to tell you. It's here." Yu Xiang picked up Yu Pinyan's wine cup and took a sip. Her cat eyes widened as she looked over. She looked innocent and cute. The old madam smiled before saying anything. She touched her soft cheeks and said, "Xiang, you actually have a twin sister." Yu Pinyan put down her chopsticks, took the wine glass from her sister, and filled it to the brim. She downed the wine in one gulp, then refilled half the glass and stuffed it back into her sister's hand. Her expression was indifferent, as if what the old lady had announced was just a trivial matter. Yu Xiang's round cat eyes widened in an instant. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and surprise. "I actually have an older sister. But why hadn't she lived at home for 14 years? Where is she now? Why didn't you tell me?" The old lady patted her back and continued, "Because her horoscope was very weak and she could die at any time, the old ancestor had no choice but to send her to the nunnery for foster care. Not only did they not tell you, other than your mother and brother, no one else in the residence knew. They were afraid that if they said too much, the ghosts and gods would find your sister and bring her to hell. You see, 14 years have passed, and her death tribulation has been resolved, so my sister is coming back." Yu Xiang's face revealed a joyful expression, but she was not happy in her heart. Whenever she thought about how the main character would compete with her for her brother's attention and love, her heart would be filled with a little worm called jealousy, nibbling away at her rationality bit by bit. Fortunately, the Marquis household did not intend to let the family Shen take her back. Instead, they hid the main character's past from her. Although she was still thinking about the main character's future, she still felt a little relieved. It wasn't that she was reluctant to leave the Marquis household, but she was reluctant to part with her brother. Thinking of this, she unconsciously leaned over and tightly hugged Yu Pinyan's arm, rubbing her cheek against it longingly. Yu Pinyan smiled, holding her hand that was holding the wine glass, and fed himself a sip. The old madam had long been accustomed to the two's intimate actions. She nodded and said, "Yes, the end of this month is an auspicious day. I'm preparing to take her back. Then I'll immediately have someone clean up the courtyard." Yu Xiang turned to look at Lulu, but was stopped by the old madam. "No need, just let her live with your mother. There's no need to prepare anything." If it weren't for the fact that taking her back could make the Lin clan calm down, the old madam would still be hesitating. Yu Xiang didn't say much. She shook her brother's arm and asked, "Brother, have you seen my sister? What's her personality like? Is she easy to get along with?" Yu Pinyan fed her a sip of wine, his gaze lingering on her moist, full, and tender lips for a long time. His voice was slightly hoarse. I've only seen her twice. She has a cold temperament and holds grudges but not gratitude. You should stay away from her in the future to avoid being schemed against. Yu Xiang couldn't help but look surprised. Yu Pinyin had only met her twice, yet he gave her such a low evaluation. She didn't know what the main character had done. But what did this have to do with her? It was enough as long as her brother didn't like her and only liked her. Yu Xiang narrowed her eyes and snickered. She lovingly rubbed against her brother's arm and obediently said, I understand. The old madam continued to pick up food, as if she hadn't heard her grandson's straightforward words. In fact, she was secretly nodding in her heart. Cold temperament and holds grudges but not gratitude. These words summed it up very well. Wasn't that exactly the case? Forget it. In any case, she was still the descendant of the family Yu. After bringing her back, she could live a good life for a few years and then find someone with a similarly tough life to marry. She could also be given a generous dowry to ensure her safety and smoothness for the rest of her life. After dinner, the old madam summoned the members of the Lin clan, Yu Siyu, and all the stewards. She then announced on the spot that the family Yu and a legitimate daughter had been fostered outside. Everyone was very surprised. After looking at each other, there was an uproar. Yu Siyu also followed the crowd and put on a startled expression. In fact, her gaze was constantly on Yu Xiang's face, and she seemed to be rejoicing in her misfortune. The members of the Lin clan counted on their fingers. There were still more than 10 days until the end of the month. They immediately objected, Mother, why must we only bring her back at the end of the month? Can't we go tomorrow? Tomorrow isn't an auspicious day. It's forbidden to go out and marry. If you want your daughter to run into bad luck, then go ahead and bring her back. The old madam closed her eyes and waved her hand. She didn't want to see the Lin clan's mournful faces. The Lin clan was very concerned about their daughter's safety. Even if it was something without a trace, they didn't dare to interfere. They pursed their lips and didn't say anything. Yu Pinyin sneered and glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. The old madam then instructed the stewards to pass on the news to the servants so that they wouldn't make a fuss before the end of the month. She then waved her hand and dismissed everyone. When the Lin clan saw Yu Pinyin bend down to carry Yu Xiang away, his movements indescribably gentle and affectionate, their originally unhappy mood became even more gloomy. They raised their voice and said, Yandere, stay here. Mother has something to discuss with you. Yu Pinyin ignored them. He held his younger sister and weighed her. When he saw her giggle, he curled his lips and walked out. Yandere, you won't listen to mother's words anymore, will you? How can you be so disobedient and unfilial? The Lin clan trembled with anger. When her daughter returned, it was as if she had suddenly woken up. She opened her eyes and observed the world around her. Her son's attitude towards her could no longer be described as cold and distant. It was even more chilling, he was turning a blind eye to her. In his eyes, she didn't exist, nor did his biological younger sister exist. He only saw the old madam and Yu Xiang. The old madam was fine. After all, she was his biological grandmother. But what was Yu Xiang? She was a bastard and a jinx. How could she have the right to share her daughter's love? The Lin clan desperately wanted their son to know who he should truly care about. Older brother, stay here and listen to what she wants to say. Yu Xiang whispered into Yu Pinyin's ear. Yu Pinyin took 2 more steps forward. When his younger sister used her fingertips to lightly poke his chest, he smiled and placed her in the wheelchair. He repeatedly reminded Tao Hong and Lu Lu to take care of her carefully. Everyone left the main hall. Yu Pinyin sat next to the old madam, who was resting with her eyes closed. He asked, What do you want to say? The Lin clan first poured herself a cup of hot tea and slowly sipped it. Only then did she speak, since Cheer has been found, shouldn't we send Yu Xiang away? When she saw the old madam suddenly open her eyes and look at her, she quickly added, we're not expelling her from the family Yu. We're just saying that she's sick and is being released to the farmstead. She will always be an eyesore if she stays in the Fu. Without waiting for the old madam to speak, Yu Pinyin crushed the armrest of the chair and sneered, if you feel that Xiang is an eyesore, then pack up your things and move to Shui Yu Nunnery to accompany Shen Miaoqi. You don't need to come back in this lifetime. You, how can you speak to me like this? The Lin clan looked at him in disbelief. Why can't I speak to you like this? I am Marquis Yongla. This is Marquis Yongla. If I want someone to stay, that person must stay. If I want someone to leave, that person must immediately scram. I am your mother. You are unfilial. The Lin clan stood up and yelled at him. My mother had already died on the day my father passed away. The current Yu is just a wisp of a spirit. Yu Pinyin shook off the sawdust in his palm and coldly said, these words were personally said by you. How could you forget? Since you are a lonely spirit, then you should peacefully stay in the tomb. Do not go around causing trouble. Otherwise, you will inevitably end up with your spirit scattered. The old madam put down her prayer beads and a mocking smile appeared on her face. Dead. 14 years ago, she had already treated this daughter-in-law as dead. But you should have died cleanly. Why did you suddenly become a corpse? She raised her own child. Even if they were not related by blood, they still had feelings. How could she just abandon them like that? The Lin clan was indeed heartless. No wonder Shen Miaoqi treated the family Shen that way and took after her. The Lin clan was speechless and looked on helplessly as her son left in large strides. He even spat out words that made her heart cold, if you dare to mention this matter in the future, you and Shen Miaoqi will scram out of the Marquis household. I, Yu Pinyin, have always been someone who does not recognize anyone. Don't try in vain to challenge my patience. The Lin clan panted and looked at the old madam, her eyes full of pleading. If you dare to expose Xiang's identity in front of her and send her away privately, you can take the divorce letter and go home. Chapter 48. The end of the month arrived quickly and the old lady sent 2 capable stewards to Shui Yu Nunnery to pick her up. Because the crown princess's premature birth case had come to light, the mastermind was the second prince's wife and her family. Although the second prince tried to deny his knowledge, he was still demoted to a commoner by the emperor and sent to the imperial mausoleum to be placed under house arrest for life. The second prince's wife's family was sent to the death row and beheaded within a few days. Following that, the Yangzhou salt tax case broke out. The Yangzhou officials embezzled more than 30 million taels of tax, which was equivalent to 10 years of the national treasury's annual income. The emperor was furious and ordered the Dragon Scale Guard to take over the case and investigate it to the end. Those who should be executed would be executed and those who should be beheaded would be beheaded. Those who should be dismissed would be dismissed. There was no mercy allowed outside the law. The end of the month was the time when everyone was in danger. Not to mention that the doors of the aristocratic families were closed, even the number of pedestrians on the streets were much lesser. Only the market was very lively. Every day, several heads could be seen and there were countless prisoners who were locked up in the Dragon Scale Guard to undergo inhumane interrogation and torture. Yu Pinyin's degree of busyness could be imagined. Shen Miaoqi returning home was a small matter that did not leave a mark on his heart. Early in the morning, he went out to complete his task. The old lady saw that the time was about right and personally went to the door to welcome her. Seeing that Yu Xiang was already waiting outside and had also burned a brazier to get rid of the bad luck, she immediately felt very satisfied. That's right, based on Shen Miaoqi's fate, she really had to get rid of the bad luck before entering. The Lin clan hurriedly rushed over and kept tidying up their hair and tugging at their skirts, appearing very nervous. They repeatedly waved their hands to send Mama Kim to the main door to take a look. "Coming, coming, young miss is back." Mama Kim lifted her skirt and rushed over. Behind her was a large group of sturdy maids carrying boxes and baskets. Shen Miao-chi's hair was tied up in a flowing cloud bun with a golden phoenix hairpin pinned on it. She was wearing a snow-white satin long dress, accompanied by the warm spring breeze and fluttering flower petals as she leisurely walked step by step. Her beautiful face was gentle like water and her elegant bearing was completely natural. In just a short half a month, she had shed the lowly servant's lowly appearance of a merchant and became a real lady of a noble family. Not only was the Lin clan ecstatic, even the old lady could not help but nod her head. Now, he could finally go on stage. Shen Miao-chi's pair of watery eyes searched through the crowd, skipping past the smiling Yusiyu and looking straight at the young lady sitting in the wheelchair. The string of jealousy in her heart was stretched to the extreme and was about to break. She asked Nanny Chin openly and secretly about Yuxiang's situation. She only knew that Yuxiang had a broken leg when she was 10 years old. She had a fierce personality and a beautiful appearance. She was a wonderful person. Both old mistress and Yupinian liked her very much. She had originally thought that the other party was on par with her, or perhaps even slightly inferior, because she had always been a beauty since she was young. Wherever she went, she would attract countless gazes. However, when she saw the real Yuxiang, she realized that Qin Mama's hesitation in saying the word delicate wasn't an insincere compliment, but a helpless action because she couldn't think of a more appropriate adjective. He saw the young girl lazily leaning against the wheelchair with one hand resting on her knee and the other supporting her chin. Her beautiful eyes with distinct black and white were looking over, and there was a divine light shining in them that was brighter and more beautiful than the spring sun. Her skin was as white as snow and her pair of eyebrows were not the currently popular curved willow leaf eyebrows. Instead, they were thick and black sword-like eyebrows. The eyebrows were slightly slanted upwards and almost disappeared into the thick hair on her temples. Her exquisite and perfect facial features had the beauty of a woman and also revealed a unique masculine domineering aura. How could the word delicate describe her? She was beautiful to the point of being fierce, beautiful to the point of being flamboyant, beautiful to the point that there was nowhere to hide. Shen Miao-chi only needed one look to feel breathless. Yuxiang was Shen Miao-chi's enemy. She would unconsciously use everything she had to compare with Yuxiang to see who was better and who was worse. She originally thought that she was not much worse than Yuxiang, especially after training hard for half a month. However, when she saw the real person, she realized that even if Yuxiang did not know how to walk, she would not be able to hold up the aura of a noble lady in front of her. She only slightly raised her eyebrows and raised her chin. This simple action brought out 120% arrogance. Shen Miao-chi did not dare to take a second look. Her heart was in a mess and her steps were also messy. As she got closer and closer to the brazier, she repeatedly took deep breaths in an attempt to regain her composure. Just at this time, the sound of a servant's greeting could be heard from the door. Shen Miao-chi turned back to look and saw Yupinian expressionlessly walking in with a spring-embroidered knife in his hand. He was wearing a crimson official's robe and the lower hem seemed to be stained with a lot of liquid. The originally intense crimson-red color was dyed black. That liquid was very thick and as he walked, drop by drop, it slid down from the cloth. A gust of wind blew and what it brought was not the fragrance of 100 blooming flowers but a nauseating fishy smell. Shen Miao-chi saw a series of bright red dots on the bluestone and discovered that his clothes were not stained with water but with fresh blood. How many people did he have to kill to bring out such a strong smell of blood? To be able to completely dye the heavy cloth wet. Shen Miao-chi seemed to have returned to the dark dungeon of the dragon scale guard and her legs could not help but go soft. Just at this time, she had already walked to the door. Mama Kim kindly reminded her, "Young miss, it is time to step over the brazier." Shen Miao Qi reflexively lifted her leg, but because she could not stand steadily, she stepped into the red-hot charcoal and cried out in pain as she hurriedly jumped away. A few sparks landed on her long skirt, immediately burning a few charred holes. Yu Pinyin directly walked past her and bent down to pick up his well-dressed younger sister. He reached out and brushed away her hair that was messed up by the wind. "Older brother, your face is stained with blood." Yu Xiang took out a handkerchief to help him wipe it. After the blood dried up, it stuck tightly to the skin and was very difficult to clean. Yu Xiang squinted her eyes and snickered. She used her wet fingertips to smear on the blood and then gently wiped it off. Yu Pinyin did not dislike it at all. His gaze lingered on her tender red lips for a long time before he looked at the battered and exhausted Shen Miao Qi, who was frantically patting her skirt. The sparks were quickly extinguished and the old lady shouted loudly, "What are you panicking for? What are you shouting for? You are so frightened over such a small matter. Still not hurrying to bring young miss to change clothes." The Lin clan was so distressed that they shed tears and hurriedly hugged their frightened daughter back to their room. The old lady brushed away the dust that was flying around her nose and looked at the overturned brazier on the ground and sighed. She was indeed a jinx. How could a brazier dispel the bad luck that she carried? Thinking of this, she pointed at Wan Qiu and ordered, "Go and tell Miao Qi to use grapefruit leaves to bathe before coming to the front hall to meet me." Wan Qiu softly acknowledged and hurriedly went down. "Yen, you should also quickly wash up. Look at how dirty you are." The old lady's impatience was replaced with heartache. Recently, there were two major cases that landed on Sun Tzu's head. The torture and murder cases were really sinful. If it was not for the fact that the Junjie passed away early, leaving behind the old, weak, women, children and a bunch of wolf-like uncles, Sun Tzu would not have to embark on this difficult and dangerous path. Yu Pinyin nodded and took his younger sister along with him. In the simple but elegant room, Yu Xiang was half sitting on the soft couch. She was playing with a snuff bottle in her hand, but her eyes were looking behind the screen that was emitting steam. Lu stood outside the door and did not dare to enter. Her heart was as anxious as a cat. How could the older brother bathe and the younger sister stay in the inner room? This pair of brother and sister never knew how to avoid this taboo. It was fine when they were young, but now that they were older, they did not take it seriously. This habit had to be changed immediately. Otherwise, how would Mistress marry in the future? As soon as she stepped out, she stepped on the blood-soaked official's robe. The blood quickly climbed up the fabric to the tip of her shoe. The dark red color looked very frightening. Lu trembled and quickly withdrew. She held her forehead and looked at Tao Hong, who was standing not far away playing with a bird. She sighed inwardly, "It's good to be a fool, there are no worries." The sound of water splashing could be heard from behind the screen. After a short while, a handsome young man with wet hair walked out. He was wearing a black brocade robe with only a jade belt around his waist. The lapel of his robe was wide open, revealing his strong chest and strong abdominal muscles. His bronze-colored skin reflected a lustrous light from the water, making him look extremely sexy. Yu Xiang's ears were hot, but her eyes were glued to the young man's body. Only when she heard a hoarse and deep laugh did she discover that her fingertips had already poked his hard abdominal muscles and were moving along the lines of his muscles. Her ears instantly turned red like blood. Yu Pinyin naturally held her small hand and slowly pulled it up. In the end, he placed it on his broad chest, letting her feel his growing impatience and desire day by day. His heart was beating very fast, but it was also very steady. Thump thump, thump thump. It was like a small hammer hitting her palm. Yu Xiang felt that her palm was not on his skin, but on burning charcoal. The temperature was shockingly hot. She moved her fingertips and wanted to pull her hand back, but the young man was one step ahead of her and released the big palm on the back of her hand. He handed over a towel and said, "Help me wipe my hair." The romantic atmosphere burst like a bubble. Yu Xiang blinked her eyes in a daze, then picked up a handkerchief and gently wiped her face. After that, she leaned on her brother's back and gently sniffed the sandalwood aroma from his hair, as she always did. The two of them did not speak. Their rapid heartbeats returned to normal in the silence. Yu Xiang slyly chuckled twice. Her slender arm wrapped around the young man's neck and asked, "Brother, if I fell into the water at the same time as my sister, who would you save first?" What kind of question was this? Was she jealous? Yu Pinyin did not answer. He just chuckled to himself. The arm around his neck tightened, as if warning him that if he did not give a satisfactory answer soon, she would be ruthless. Yu Pinyin stretched out his arms and pulled his sister into his embrace. He tapped the tip of her nose and said, "Naturally, I would save you. Then if I fell into the water at the same time as my mother, who would you save first?" Yu Xiang leaned closer and stared into his eyes. "Naturally, I would still save you," Yu Pinyin quickly answered. His eyes sparkled with joy. He loved Xiang'er, who did not hide her possessiveness at all. Then if I am. She realized that it was not appropriate to compare herself with the ancestor. It was obvious that she was making things difficult for her brother. She omitted the unfinished words and hugged her brother's thin waist with a satisfied smile. Yu Pinyin forcefully pressed her into his arms and sighed silently. The Lin clan kept moving food into their daughter's bowl. They could not wait to move all the dishes in front of their daughter. Yu Miaoqi returned the courtesy and placed the food back into her bowl. Yu Xiang supported her chin with one hand and enjoyed the mother and daughter's endless affectionate drama. Yu Xiu, who was sitting opposite her, winked at her with schadenfreude. But the conflict in the hall also made her understand that no matter how much the Lin clan doted on Yu Miaoqi, as long as old lady Tai Tai and Yu Pinyin were here, they could forget about suppressing Yu Xiang. 14 years had passed and the Lin clan was no longer the matriarch who kept her word. Yu Pinyin pinched his sister's chin and turned her head back. He said in a deep voice, "What is there to see? Eat. Older brother will get food for you. You don't need to be envious of others." He had also longed for the maternal love of the Lin clan. But after so many years, he understood that it was something that did not exist. If his sister needed affection, he could give it to her. He could even give her more than she could imagine. Old Lady Tai Tai also felt sorry for her grandchildren. She gave each of them some food and gently said, "Eat. If you want anything, just tell old ancestor. Old ancestor will get it for you." She only gathered this once. Next time, she would let the mother and daughter go back to their own room. This attitude was really disgusting. They were all children. She could not just favor one child and treat the others as if they were picked up. Yu Miaoqi was very perceptive. She quickly persuaded the Lin clan to eat on their own. Then, she gave old lady Tai Tai and Yu Pinyin a piece of fish each with a shy smile on her face. "Hey, don't give big brother fish. Big brother doesn't eat fish." Yu Xiang put the fish back into her bowl. The smile on Yu Miaoqi's face stiffened. She ignored Yu Xiang and looked at the Lin clan to ask, "Mother, does big brother hate to eat fish? This is my first time coming home, so I really don't know. What does big brother like to eat? Tell me and I'll remember." The Lin clan was stumped by the question and looked very awkward. When her husband died, her son was only 5 years old. He did not even have the ability to take care of himself. He ate whatever was fed to him. How could she know what her son liked? Old Lady Tai Tai's face darkened when she saw the Lin clan trying to avoid the question. Her daughter-in-law's indifference to her grandson had always been a thorn in her heart. She would never forgive her daughter-in-law's irresponsible behavior until her death. The more she cared about Yu Miaoqi now, the more pitiful her grandson looked back then. A wave of depression surged into old lady Taitai's chest. She could neither spit it out nor swallow it. It was very uncomfortable. Yu Xiang's face also turned cold. She slammed her chopsticks on the table. Yu Miaoqi knew that she had said something wrong, but she did not know where she had gone wrong. Even if she was not the biological daughter of the Shen family, Mother Shen had never mistreated her. She had even given her twice the amount of motherly love. Therefore, she could never imagine that there would be a mother in this world who would ignore her own child like this. As the saying goes, a peck is a drink, and a bite is returned with a bite. The Lin clan's current awkward situation was also her own doing. Yu Miaoqi did not dare to ask the gloomy old lady Taitai. She could only look at Yu Xiang beside her. "Little sister, what does Big Brother like to eat? My culinary skills are not bad. I can cook for Big Brother personally in the future. It can also make up for the regret of us not seeing each other for so many years." After hearing this, Yu Xiang was even more unwilling to tell her. She hugged Yu Pinyan's arm and pretended to be ignorant as she asked, "Big Brother, what do you like to eat?" "I forgot about it too." Yu Pinyan tapped the tip of her perky nose and said with a smile, "I like to eat whatever you like to eat." Yu Miaoqi gripped her chopsticks tightly and asked persistently, "Then what do you like to eat, little sister?" Yu Xiang tilted her head and looked at her. Her contrasting cat eyes sparkled with a sly light. "Me? I'm not picky. I like to eat everything." In the end, she was just teasing her. Not only was she hostile to her, but she also disliked her. But what right did she have? Who did she think she was? The fire in Yu Miaoqi's heart burned fiercely. Instead, she smiled faintly and lowered her head to eat with tears in her eyes. Her aggrieved attitude softened old lady Taitai's heart. She picked up her chopsticks again and said, "Don't talk while eating. Everyone, eat quietly. Today is a good day. Don't waste it." Everyone agreed in low voices. Yu Xiang no longer had any appetite. She moved a plate of drunk prawns in front of her, peeled the shell, dipped it in sauce, and stuffed it into her brother's mouth. Yu Pinyan poured half a bowl of egg custard into a bowl, mixed it with white rice, and fed it to her brother one spoonful at a time until they were half full. The siblings had loved to eat like this since they were young. Old lady Taitai was already used to it. On the other hand, Yu Miaoqi kept looking over. She did not show it on her face, but her heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. She could see that in terms of ranking in the Marquis household, Yu Pinyan was the true master, followed by old lady Taitai, and then the Lin clan. If she wanted to have a foothold in the Marquis household, winning over the Lin clan was far from enough. She also needed to win the favor of old lady Taitai and Yu Pinyan. However, based on how much Yu Pinyan spoiled Yu Xiang, it would not be easy for her to occupy a more important position in his heart than Yu Xiang. Without Yu Pinyan's love, how could she live in the future? All kinds of calculations appeared in her mind. Yu Miaoqi felt like she had lost her appetite. Yu Xiang was also absent-minded. In fact, she really wanted to grab Yu Miaoqi and ask her how her family was doing. Although she did not want to leave with them, she still wanted to know about them. If they were doing well, then so be it. If they were not doing well, then she could still help them out a little. She would have done her best for the original owner. However, it seemed like old lady Taitai and her brother did not want her to have any contact with that family. She could only pretend that she did not know. She knew what was going on in her heart, but she still had to pretend to be ignorant. This kind of life was not easy. Everyone at the table had different ideas. Unknowingly, the meal was finished. Yu Pinyan did not want to stay any longer. After saying goodbye to old lady Taitai, he picked up his little sister and left first. Yu Miaoqi wanted to leave with the Lin clan, but Yu Xiu stopped her. The Lin clan was happy to see her have a playmate. They waved their hands and told her to go ahead. Yu Xiu led Yu Miaoqi back to her small courtyard. As soon as she entered the door, she asked, "Where is your original family? Why didn't you let them come and pick up Yu Xiang? Don't you hate her for taking over a magpie's nest for 14 years? That family is a lowly traveling merchant. Yu Xiang should be the daughter of a merchant family. This is letting her off too easily." The smile on Yu Miaoqi's face froze. She said in a low voice, "I don't know what you're talking about." At the same time, her good impression of this stepsister of hers turned into deep malice. It was one thing for her mother, grandmother, and brother to know about the past that she had tried her best to cover up, but why did this person know as well? Without a doubt, Yu Xiu had surpassed Yu Xiang. She had become the obstacle that she wanted to get rid of the most. She was the legitimate daughter of the Marquis family, not some daughter of a merchant family. The author has something to say. Thank you to my patrons. In order to maintain this relationship, I will work hard to write. I will definitely update twice this weekend. If I see a single update, I will definitely make it up within a day. Chapter 50. After the two entered the room, members of the Chiu clan sneaked around the back wall and pressed their ears against it to eavesdrop. When Yu Xiu saw that she refused to admit it, she covered her mouth with a handkerchief and chuckled. "Younger sister, you don't have to play dumb with me. I've known about you for a long time. I've been waiting for you to come back all these years. It's so pitiful that you went to that kind of family and suffered so much. Quickly tell older sister about it." She picked up the girl's slightly rough and scarred hand and gently patted it. Yu Miaoqi forcefully pulled her hand back and forced a smile. "Older sister, what nonsense are you saying? I've always been fostered at Shuiyuan Nunnery, so how could I have any other family? I haven't seen my mother in a long time and miss her very much, so I'm going back to accompany her. When I have time in the future, I'll visit older sister again." After she finished speaking, she quickly left, ignoring Yu Xiu's pleas to stay. When she was far away, members of the Chiu clan crept out from behind the wall and pushed open the door. They advised, "Eldest miss, you're really muddle-headed. It's one thing for you to know such a secret, but why did you have to bring it up in front of her? Are you afraid that she won't miss you? You'll be able to get married after this period of time, so don't cause any more trouble. You old dog, you're eavesdropping on me again. Sooner or later, the heavens will send down a bolt of divine lightning to strike you to death. Why don't you go to Yu Xiang and tell her about her family background if you have the ability? If you dare, I'll give you 500 taels of silver." Yu Xiu pointed at her nose and scolded angrily. The Chiu clan member lowered her voice and said, "Even if young miss gave me 50,000 taels of silver, I wouldn't dare to ask for it, let alone 500 taels of silver. If this matter were to blow up, Master Ho would skin me alive and chop me into minced meat, and that would be considered light punishment. Who knows, he might even kill my entire family. Young miss, why do you want to send me to my death in vain?" When she thought about how her older brother doted on Yu Xiang, Yu Xiu fell silent and tore her handkerchief to vent her anger. The Chiu clan continued to persuade her. "Miss, you really made a mistake today. You think that by revealing second miss's identity, you're trying to form an alliance with someone who knows you well, but in fact, it's the exact opposite. It's fine if you don't say anything, but once you do, she'll definitely hate you. Think about it, if you ask the merchant to take Miss Xiang away, wouldn't her past be exposed? Being 14 years old in the Shang family and being 14 years old in the Marquis household were completely different. Now that this matter had blown up, the one who found it most difficult to maintain her standing was not Miss Xiang, but her. How could she still have the face to meet others in the future? Don't you think she'll be afraid and hate you if you rashly expose it in front of her? Who knows how he'll deal with you in the future? Yu Xiu carefully digested her words. The more she thought about it, the more worried she became. She put on a strong front and sneered, "Don't be an alarmist." His younger sister looked like a gentle person. She was different from Yu Xiang, who was a shrew. Moreover, even if she hated me, what could she do to me? She and the Lin clan's status in the Marquis household isn't even as high as mine. Just as they were speaking, Yu Miaoqi's head maidservant, Bao Sheng, reported from outside the door, "Eldest miss, second miss sent this servant to deliver something to you. She said that she left in a hurry this time and is truly sorry. She wants you to visit her more often in the future. You're all sisters, so you should be of one mind." Yu Xiu opened the brocade box that Bao Sheng had delivered and discovered a set of exquisitely crafted 8-treasure jadeite head ornaments inlaid with gold. It felt heavy in her hands and was a bit dazzling. She happily sent away Bao Sheng and smugly looked towards the Chiu clan. "Look, she's trying to win me over. As expected, she has a soft personality and is easy to manipulate. With her as my tool, Yu Xiang's going to suffer in the future." Soft personality? The Chiu clan shook their heads as they lifted the curtain and left. Although that Yu Miaoqi's face was gentle and clean, her eyes were very cloudy and emitted a sinister aura. If Yu Xiu were to mix with her, eldest miss wouldn't even know how she died. Forget it, since eldest miss doesn't believe me, I'll just say less. Yu Miaoqi walked on a dimly lit path with towering trees on both sides. The family Shen used to be a tycoon. There were pavilions and pagodas everywhere in the house, and it was a dazzling sight. She originally thought that the family Shen's status was only a bit lower than other families, but after returning to the Marquis household, she realized that the difference between the two families was like heaven and earth. The Marquis household didn't have any exquisitely carved beams or painted rafters. It was the most rigid and orthodox square building. The colors weren't the usual gold, green, red, and blue of wealthy families, but a dull green. Even the plants in the courtyard were mostly giant trees instead of flowering trees. However, it was such a simple structure that gave off a grandiose aura that could swallow everything. Inside it, one would feel especially small. Yu Miaoqi walked to the front of the Lin clan's house and raised her head to look at the beast-shaped roof on the porch. Its big mouth looked as if it wanted to swallow her whole. She shook her head. She was both shocked and happy. So this was the so-called prestigious family, a century-old family. And from now on, she would be the legitimate daughter of this family. She would have an even greater and more glorious future. If anyone tried to stop her, they would be her enemy and she would do everything in her power to get rid of them. After standing still for a long time, she calmed down. She ordered Bao Sheng to deliver something to Yu Xiu as she walked towards the Lin clan's house. "My child, you're back. Here are some bolts of cloth. Come and take a look. After matching the colors, I'll have the tailor make some spring clothes for you." Seeing that their daughter had returned, the Lin clan happily welcomed her. Yu Miaoqi walked over to inspect the cloth. It was all expensive Sichuan brocade, but the colors were somewhat old-fashioned. She couldn't help but frown. The Lin clan felt something and hurriedly explained, "These are the satin that mother saved up a few years ago. They're all tributes and are very precious. Although the colors are no longer fashionable, they're still good enough to make a few gowns." After saying that, she waved to Mama Kim, "Go and call the shopkeeper of Splendid Pavilion over. Tell her to only bring the most expensive jewelry and cloth. My daughter wants to choose." Mama Kim obeyed the order and left. The Lin clan pulled open a bolt of cloth and placed it on their daughter's body. Yu Miaoqi dismissed all the maidservants in the house and asked in a low voice, "Mother, how did you see you know about my background?" "Ah, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten about it." The Lin clan's expression changed greatly. "That year, your grandmother and I were discussing how to send Yu Xiang away, and she happened to overhear it. Mother, she even asked me today why I didn't let the family Shen take Yu Xiang away. I was so shocked that I couldn't find the words to reply to her for a moment. Mother, what if she spreads the news about me? How will I face people in the future? Yu Miaoqi took out a handkerchief to wipe her tears. After thinking for a long time, she finally decided to tell the Lin clan and let the Lin clan deal with Wuxia. She had just returned home and hadn't yet found her footing. It would be extremely difficult for her to get rid of Wuxia. It would be cheaper for the Lin clan to do it. She also wanted to get rid of Wuxiang, but the premise was that her background couldn't be exposed. Now, she had no way to deal with Wuxiang. She had nowhere to vent the grievances and resentment in her heart, but Wuxia had to bump into her and bring her bad luck. The Lin clan was also furious and cursed in a low voice, that lowly wench isn't easy to deal with. She wants to use you as a tool to deal with Wuxiang. Don't worry, mother will definitely think of a way to get rid of her. It's too bad that your older brother and old ancestor didn't agree to let Wuxiang live alone in the farmstead. Son, bear with it for a few days. Mother will think of another way. When Yu Miaoqi heard this, her heart trembled. She hurriedly said, Mother, what did you say to grandmother and older brother? She was afraid that the Lin clan would push this matter onto her and cause her older brother and grandmother to dislike her. I said that keeping her in the manor would be an eyesore, so it would be better to send her away. My son, I know what I'm saying. Don't worry. The Lin clan wasn't stupid. They just didn't want to be clear-headed. She knew very well what to do to make her daughter happy and satisfied. Yu Miaoqi breathed a sigh of relief. She threw herself into the Lin clan's arms and cried softly. Prefecture Yu was completely different from what she had imagined. She had thought that her family, whom she hadn't seen in years, would welcome her home in the most enthusiastic way, but in the end, they were even more indifferent than the last. Only the Lin clan treated her wholeheartedly. No matter how cold her heart was, it warmed up a little. The Lin clan patted her back and promised again, Mother is here, so don't worry. Mother will definitely think of a way to get Wuxia far away so that she won't get in your way again. As for Wuxiang, let's take it slow. She's not a child of the Marquis household, yet she still wants to occupy the Marquis household's territory. She's not afraid of shortening her life. The mother and daughter hugged and chatted for a while. Mama Kim led the shopkeeper of Splendid Pavilion over, followed by many maidservants carrying boxes. When the red lacquered boxes were opened, there were all kinds of precious jewels and fabrics. When the sun shone, the entire room was filled with sparkling colors. It was so dazzling that they couldn't open their eyes. Madam, feel free to choose whatever you like. These are all the latest jewels and fabrics this year. They're treasures at the bottom of the box. If it were any other store, I wouldn't be willing to take them out. The shopkeeper smiled very flatteringly. The Lin clan led Yu Miaoqi forward to choose. She wore this hairpin and that gauze draped over her shoulders. She simply couldn't bear to part with them. After choosing for more than an hour, the Lin clan pointed to several boxes and slowly said, How much are these worth? Calculate it for me. I'll take them all. The shopkeeper adhered to the principle of doing more and talking less. Although he was very curious about Yu Miaoqi's identity, he didn't take another look. He picked up the little golden abacus hanging in front of his chest and fiddled with it for a while. He smiled flatteringly and said, Madam, the total is 3,568 taels. Please give me a matching tile so that I can withdraw the money from the accounts. Matching tile? What matching tile? The Lin clan was stunned. This is the Fu's rule. You actually don't know? Miss Xiang has said that anyone who spends more than 100 taels has to write a note and go to her place to get a matching tile. The accounts will only withdraw the money if they have a matching tile. Towards the end of the year, Miss Xiang has an account book, this commoner has an account book, and the accounts master has an account book. These 3 account books all need to be accounted for. Not a single cent can be wrong. The shopkeeper was speechless as he explained. When it came to managing a household, Miss Xiang was the only one in the entire capital who had such skills. There was a saying that when the water was too clear, there would be no fish. The mistress of the household usually turned a blind eye to the corruption of the servants and pretended not to see it. However, Miss Xiang couldn't tolerate sand in her eyes. She formulated a set of extremely strict accounting methods that made it difficult for anyone to steal a needle. Miss Xiang had a good saying, "You eat my food, wear my clothes, and use my things. Your entire family depends on me to support you, yet you still steal my things behind my back. You have the heart of a wolf and lungs of a dog, so why should I indulge you? It's not like I'm a saint." This sentence simply struck a chord in the shopkeeper's heart. She secretly asked Miss Xiang for advice, and the accounts of the several branches all followed this list. Since then, the atmosphere had become much clearer, and she felt very comfortable. The shopkeeper was full of praise for Yu Xiang, but the Lin clan exploded in anger. She questioned, "Since when do I need to report to her when I buy things? Who does she think she is?" Realizing that she had misspoken, the Lin clan hurriedly covered her mouth with a handkerchief. The shopkeeper pretended that he didn't hear anything and said with a smile, "Miss Xiang has been managing this household for 4 years. She set this rule early on, so this commoner has no choice. You don't want to let this commoner have a matching tile, but you can't let this commoner go to the accounts room and rob it, right? The Fu's patrolling guards would chop this commoner up. Madam, you can send someone to ask Miss Xiang. It'll only take half a cup of tea's time." The Lin clan had no choice but to send Mama Kim to get a matching tile. Chapter 51. After Yu Pinyin carried his sister back to the room, he was not in a hurry to leave. He went to the outer room, twisted a wet handkerchief, and wiped off the thick makeup on her face. A thorny rose instantly turned into a sweet and greasy piece of honey that was about to melt under the sun. This softness and sweetness only bloomed in front of him, making Yu Pinyin's heart tremble. A limp and numb aftertaste flowed from his heart to his limbs and bones. It was more intoxicating than drinking several large jars of strong liquor. He caressed his sister's delicate cheeks and looked at her for a long time. He found that there was still a trace of bright red lipstick on her lips. He gently wiped it away with his finger, then put it in his mouth and tasted it carefully. It was indeed sweet and greasy. Yu Xiang opened her clear cat eyes and asked heartlessly, "Is it sweet?" "I put a lot of beeswax and rose petals." "It's sweet, but it can be sweeter." Yu Pinyin handed the handkerchief to Lulu, who was a little dumbfounded. He took off his boots and got on the couch. He held his sister in his arms and took out a journal from behind her pillow. He slowly flipped through it, but he did not plan to leave. Lulu's heart was in his throat. He walked out with heavy steps and carried the basin out. Master Ho's actions just now were strange no matter how he looked at it. They were brother and sister, right? Why did they look like a newlywed couple? Yu Xiang did not feel worried at all. Instead, she giggled and poked her brother's hard chest. "How much more beeswax should I put in the dessert? I'm making lipstick, not candy." "Brother, when did you like to eat candy so much?" "After being together with you." However, Yu Pinyin did not dare to say this out loud. He pinched her white fingertips and said meaningfully, "The way you eat it is different, so the taste is naturally different. There are different ways to eat lipstick." Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Suddenly, a light flashed through her mind. She was about to think about it when Tao Hong opened the curtain and said, "Miss, Mama Kim is here." The light disappeared in the blink of an eye and could no longer be found. Mama Kim was a concubine of the Lin clan. As far as Yu Xiang could remember, she had never stepped into his courtyard except for that one time when she gave him the demon-suppressing talisman. This time, she probably had something to ask of him. Let her in. She snuggled into the crook of Yupinyan's arm and propped her head up to look at the miscellaneous notes with him. Mama Kim was dazzled by the scene in front of her. He saw the brother and sister pair, one handsome beyond compare, the other delicate beyond compare. They were leaning against each other on the soft couch, reading the same book together. Their heads were very close together, the tips of their noses almost touching each other, not to mention their breaths that had long since become inseparable. This kind of attitude was too intimate even for a pair of blood-related siblings, let alone a pair of fake siblings. Moreover, Master Ho's gaze that occasionally swept over Yu Xiang was filled with tenderness, affection, and tenderness. Mama Kim's heart suddenly thumped, as if she had caught a glimpse of some secret. However, she saw Master Ho casually glance over. There was no trace of tenderness in his eyes, only a bone-piercing chill. She was almost torn to pieces by this gaze that contained countless daggers. She hurriedly cleared her mind of distracting thoughts and knelt down to pay her respects. This servant greets Master Ho and Miss 3. Yu Pinyin didn't pay her any attention and lowered his eyes to continue reading. Yu Xiang furrowed his brows and said, "I'm really not used to the second Miss suddenly becoming Miss 3. Mama Kim lowered her head even more, not knowing how to respond. However, Yu Xiang didn't intend to let her off and said sarcastically, "You people from the main branch have always disdained to patronize my courtyard. The last time you came was 8 years ago. What a rare guest." Mama Kim's heart trembled slightly, and she felt somewhat uneasy. The Lin clan didn't care about the household's affairs, but that didn't mean she was blind. She could clearly see the changes in Yu Xiang over the years. Perhaps she had been enlightened by the great calamity, but her foolishness had disappeared. Not only did her brain become more active, her appearance became more beautiful, and her temper became more unreasonable. At the age of 10, she managed the large marquis household in an orderly and proper manner. In terms of ability and bearing, she didn't lose to any noble lady, not to mention the old lady in Master Ho's unprincipled pampering of her. If she was disrespectful to the madam and wasn't close to the second miss, then the madam and the young miss wouldn't have good days in the future. When she returned, should she persuade the madam to pull herself together and take control of the household's affairs? Only then would she be able to contend with her. Otherwise, wouldn't the marquis household become the world of a bastard child? Mama Kim's mind was constantly turning, but she didn't show it on her face. She respectfully replied, "Because the madam is very worried and depressed, she can't be separated from her all day long." This servant didn't dare to neglect her and neglected young Mississippi young miss, "Please forgive me." Yu Xiang didn't care if her brother had finished reading. She directly flipped back to the page she was reading and said carelessly, "You really know how to talk. What do you mean by forgive me? If I accused you of a crime, Mother would definitely cry until the marquis household collapsed. You don't visit a temple without a cause. Speak, what is it?" The madam had become more and more muddle-headed in recent years, wiping away her tears and sobbing, indulging in the past. Mama Kim also felt annoyed. After hearing Yu Xiang's words, she felt even more embarrassed. She lowered her voice and said, "The madam sent this servant to ask for a match of cards from Miss 3. Shopkeeper Qian is waiting over there." Yu Xiang finally looked at her and said slowly, "You also know the rules of the household. Where are the list and the receipt? Let me see." Fortunately, shopkeeper Qian reminded her before she left. Mama Kim brought the list along and quickly bowed as she handed it over. Yu Xiang left her brother's arms and unfolded the list to look carefully. Yu Pinyin held her waist, afraid that she would lose her balance and fall. Yu Xiang smiled as she looked, but the words that came out of her mouth didn't carry a trace of joy. "Look at how generous Mother is. Gold silk incense wood inlaid with cicadas and jade beads, a palace makeup with 1,000 leaves of golden peony hair ornaments, an exquisite emerald grass head worm inlaid with pearls, a gold silk brocade gown, a cloud of butterflies skirt. I stayed by her side for 14 years, but I didn't receive a single needle or thread from her. I only received a pile of demon-suppressing talismans. I want to ask, am I really Mother's biological daughter? She naturally knew in her heart that she wasn't her biological daughter, but in the eyes of others, she didn't know at all. It was normal for her to be jealous and ridiculed after seeing the list. Yu Xiang was just this kind of person. If anyone wronged her, she would return the favor regardless of whether they were in the right or wrong. If she could live a flamboyant life, she wouldn't be sullen. Although Yu Miaoqi hid it well, the deep hatred that occasionally flowed out of her eyes couldn't escape Yu Xiang's eyes. It was fine if she hated her, but she also hated her brother. This was unbearable. Since she harbored resentment and was waiting for an opportunity to take revenge, Yu Xiang didn't plan on tolerating her. If she showed her hostile attitude early on, she wouldn't need to feign civility in the future and disgust herself for no reason. Mama Kim lowered her head and didn't dare to answer. In front of Master Ho, who dared to say the word bastard? That person didn't need to live anymore. Moreover, for the sake of second Mrs. reputation, they had no choice but to acknowledge Yu Xiang's status as the legitimate daughter. Yu Pinyin put down his book and pulled her into his arms. He gently patted her and comforted her. Why bother with this? We're all grown up and don't need to rely on her. What does it matter if she's your biological daughter or not? Brother will buy you whatever you like. Even if you want the stars in the sky, brother will find a way to pluck them for you. The gloominess on Yu Xiang's face instantly dissipated. She hugged his arm and smiled sweetly. I don't want the stars in the sky. I only want brother. Brother is my whole world. As long as I have brother, I'm satisfied. Yu Pinyin clearly understood her unfinished words. He leaned over and rubbed his beard against her delicate cheek. He squinted his eyes to admire her flower-like smile. Mama Kim didn't dare to raise her head to look at the brother and sister on the bed. She secretly pondered Master Ho's words. What did he mean by don't need to rely on her? What did he mean by what did it matter if she wasn't his biological daughter? Did Master Ho's heart turn cold and he didn't plan on acknowledging Master anymore? That's right. Anyone who was abandoned for 14 years would have resentment in their heart. Not only did Master treat Master Ho coldly, but he also doted on second Mississippi. This was clearly stabbing a knife into Master Ho's heart. Both of them were his biological daughters. He couldn't neglect one and dote on the other. The one he doted on would be married off sooner or later. Wasn't Master's stable life today all because of Master Ho? Even second Mrs. future would have to depend on the Marquis to fight for it. Now that she was estranged from Master Ho, it would be difficult for her to advance in the future. Just by looking at the things she bought, she would have to write an IOU if she spent more than 100 taels. Which matriarch would be reduced to such a lowly situation? As Mama Kim wrote down the IOU, she secretly pondered. She planned to go back and persuade her master to quickly win back Master Ho's heart. Yu Xiang took the IOU and glanced at it before handing it back. Write down the year, month, and date, why it was spent, and who it was. Then put your fingerprint on it. In the future, you will have to follow this rule when you pick up the tiles. I've already made an exception for elder sister's return this time. Otherwise, I won't approve anything above 3,000 taels unless there's an important celebration. In the future, if you want to be so extravagant, you'll have to pay for it yourselves. Seeing Mama Kim's dissatisfaction, she coldly said, don't talk about mother. Even old ancestor and I have to save money for our daily expenses. Of course, older brother is an exception. Older brother has to socialize outside. How can he be short of money? This is something you can't compare to. Yu Pinyin gave a low laugh. He really liked Xiang's appearance as a little housekeeper. Because the Lin clan lived in seclusion and rarely went out, they ate vegetarian food and prayed to Buddha. Their daily expenses were mostly yellow joss paper, candles, incense, and other offerings. 20 taels a month was more than enough for them. Therefore, they took the tiles from the future Yuxiang. Mama Kim patiently agreed. She wrote down the IOU again and put her fingerprint on it. Only then did she successfully take the tiles. Just as she was about to open the door curtain, she heard Yuxiang call out, "Wait, I haven't given elder sister a gift yet. You can take it while you're at it." Mama Kim had no choice but to turn around and wait on the side with a bow. Yu Pinyin carried her to the dressing table and allowed her to pick and choose from the dressing table. He casually picked up a velvet flower and inserted it into her hair. After admiring it for a moment, he took it off and inserted it into her hair bun. The corners of his eyes and the tips of his eyebrows revealed a deep happiness. This gentle and considerate appearance was poles apart from his cold and cruel style of doing things. He simply didn't seem like the same person. Yuxiang picked up a butterfly hairpin and looked at it. She shook her head and said, "This won't do. Elder brother gave it to me." She then took out a set of ruby jewelry and continued to shake her head. "This was also given to me by elder brother. This won't do." After picking and choosing for a long time, she rejected all the things that were given to her by Yu Pinyin. Only then did she realize that 99% of her jewelry was given to her by her elder brother. She immediately felt sweet as if she had eaten honey. She glanced at her elder brother from time to time and then pursed her lips to hide her happiness. Yu Pinyin pretended not to know, but in fact, he loved her possessive look. He held back his laughter and reached out to gently tap the tip of her nose. Seeing that Mama Kim's face was about to turn green, Lulu had no choice but to take a dusty box from an antique shelf and said, "Miss, this is the headdress that you bought from Jinxiu Pavilion last month. You haven't worn it even once. It's perfect for 2nd Mississippi." Only then did Yuxiang close the box and said carelessly, "Then I'll give this to you. Go back and tell elder sister to come to my place to play when she has time. My legs are inconvenient, so I won't be able to visit her." Mama Kim repeatedly agreed. She held the box and hurriedly rushed to the main room. It took her half an hour to match the tiles. She reckoned that her master's face was about to be destroyed. How was she the mistress of the household? She was more like a concubine who lived by others' whims. The author has something to say. "I already said that I wanted to maintain a long-term relationship. I'm going to write 2 chapters today. Moi." I also saw a very deranged comment. It said that when would elder brother's lifeblood be able to have intimate interactions with his lifeblood? Although it's deranged, it's very touching. It inexplicably made me imagine scenes like a temple H, a rockery H, a boudoir H, and so on. Ahem, in the future, I'll stop when it's appropriate. It's just that I'll stop when it's appropriate. Right now, everyone is pulling lampposts. It's time to test your imagination. Chapter 52. The Lin clan was still smiling as they helped their daughter comb her hair and tried on the hairpin, but after a quarter of an hour, they began to look outside. Half an hour later, their faces were distorted, so they sent a servant girl to look for it. Shopkeeper Qian opened the remaining red lacquer boxes and eloquently introduced their jewelry, which eased the awkward atmosphere. After a short while, Mama Kim came in with a box. "Why did you take so long?" the Lin clan questioned in a deep voice. Yu Miaoqi was holding a golden hairpin and putting on makeup in front of the mirror, as if she hadn't heard anything. "Madam, Miss 3 searched for a long time before finding this box. She said she wanted to give it to 2nd Miss, so she was delayed." Mama Kim handed the box over and found that it was covered in dust. It was obviously something that Yuxiang had abandoned. She felt very embarrassed and quickly wiped the dust off with her sleeve. Mrs. Lin's originally gloomy face was now dripping with water. Just as she was about to reprimand them for going too far, shopkeeper Qian exclaimed, "Aya, isn't this our Jinxiu Pavilion's one and only Luan and Phoenix circling pearls golden buyao? Not to mention that each of the 3 eastern pearls on the buyao is the size of a longan, which can be considered rare in the world. Just this box alone is expensive. This box is carved from a whole piece of Phoebe Jinan wood, and the lid is inlaid with several begonia flowers. The petals are cut and pieced together with the best red jade. The color is tender and beautiful, and it looks like a real flower under the sun. It makes people want to reach out and touch it." As she spoke, she took the box and turned it in the light. She clicked her tongue in admiration. 2, 3. Miss Xiang is so generous. This box alone is the treasure of our shop, not to mention the ornaments. Even if we sell each eastern pearl separately, it will cost this much. She stretched out a hand and shook it. Today was strange. Marquis Yongle had a second miss who appeared out of nowhere and said that she was Miss Xiang's twin sister. The two of them didn't look the least bit alike, and their temperaments were completely different. She didn't know where they came from. She didn't care, as long as she could earn money. Shopkeeper Qian muttered in his heart, but on the surface, he praised Yu Xiang's gift. Only then did the Lin clan's gloomy expression soften a little. He handed over the matching cards and said, "Take the matching cards and withdraw the money. Thank you for your patronage, madam. Next time, if you need anything, just send someone to call this commoner woman. This commoner woman's things can be considered one of the best in the capital. I definitely won't let madam down." Shopkeeper Qian smiled as she received her tile. After she left, she let out a sigh of relief. The Lin clan ordered Mama Kim to put away all the jewelry on the table. When they turned back, they saw their daughter crying over the open begonia box. What happened to you? Who made you unhappy?" She hurriedly walked over and pulled her daughter into her arms to pat her. "Mother, this box alone is so valuable, not to mention the jewelry inside." She closed the box and pushed it away. Her tears fell even more fiercely, and when I was in the family shen, I never even saw what Dongzhu looked like. For me, those were things that I could only hope for, but could never obtain. It was a life that I would never dare to live. But what was the truth? In fact, these things originally belonged to me, but she took them all away. Mother, I even have to report to her when I buy some clothes and jewelry. Am I really the legitimate daughter of the Marquis family? If I have to live under her whims in the future, why would I come back? It would be better to send me back. The more she spoke, the more upset she became. She untied a pouch from her waist and choked with sobs. "Mother, other than you, who else in the Marquis family cares about me? Look at what grandmother gave me. It's just a protective talisman. A protective talisman that can be bought with a single copper coin from a temple, but she gave it to me as a meeting gift. She despises her daughter from the bottom of her heart." In fact, Yu Miaoqi misunderstood. This protective talisman wasn't something that could be bought with a single copper coin. It was a protective talisman that was personally written and consecrated by the Han Dynasty's divine monk, the Kohai monk. If it was taken out, it would be a good thing that everyone would fight over. Fortunately, Yu Xiang had a good relationship with the Kohai monk over the years, so he made an exception even though he had stopped writing for 10 years. Unfortunately, the old madam's painstaking efforts were all fed to a dog's stomach. Not only did Yu Miaoqi not appreciate her kindness, she even secretly hated her. When the members of the Lin clan heard this, they couldn't calm down. While cursing the old madam for being biased, they walked out of the room and threw the protective talisman into the brazier that was burning the yellow joss paper. When the flames licked the talisman, it emitted a strong fragrance, but it disappeared in a flash. She turned back and hugged her daughter. Gnashing her teeth, she whispered, don't worry. From now on, Mother won't let you suffer the humiliation you suffered today. In any case, Mother is still the mistress of the Marquis household. After being idle for 14 years, it's time for me to take control of the household again. It's not certain who will live under whose nose. Mother, only you treat your daughter the best. Your daughter can only rely on you. Yu Miaoqi threw herself into her arms and sobbed. Her tear-filled eyes quickly flashed with a dark light. Mama Kim had a stomach full of words to say to persuade her master, but she discovered that the second miss had already said everything she wanted to say. If her master took control of the household again, she would be the Marquis household's respected steward. How much money would be waiting for her? Thinking of this, she couldn't suppress the joy in her heart. She quickly used her handkerchief to cover the smile on her lips, but the corners of her eyes drooped as if she was very sad. In the main courtyard, the matriarch was flipping through a scripture book when she saw Wan Chou come in with a solemn face. He whispered something into Mama Ma's ear. She could vaguely hear the words "Madam, burn it, dislike it." Mama Ma's expression changed greatly, and the hand holding the handkerchief unconsciously trembled. "What are you saying? Let me hear it too." The matriarch turned a page of the Buddhist scripture and slowly opened her mouth. Mama Ma sent Wan Chou away with a hesitant expression. The matriarch sneered, "Is the Lin clan up to no good again? Speak." Mama Ma knelt at her feet and sorrowfully said, replying to the old lady, "Miss said that you disliked her and gave her a gift of a protective talisman that could be bought with a copper coin from the temple." Madam was furious when she heard this and threw the talisman into the fire and burned it. Ever since the matriarch found out about her granddaughter's fate, she had sent Yu Xiang to ask for the talisman and enshrined it in the Zhenghua temple. Every day, a senior monk would chant sutras to bless the talisman. This enshrining of the talisman lasted for 4 years. Every month, the incense oil offered to the Zhenghua temple cost 200 taels of silver, all of which came from the matriarch's own pocket. Not to mention her sincerity, just the money added up to more than 10,000 taels of silver. How could she burn it all in one fire? You burned it, but you had to slander the matriarch verbally. What kind of heartless and ungrateful person is this? Anyone who had a trace of respect for the matriarch wouldn't do such a thing. Mama Ma hated that she couldn't rush to the main room and give the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi 2 slaps each. However, the matriarch didn't get angry. Instead, she chuckled softly. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with vicissitudes of life. Yandere was right. That Yu Miaoqi has a cold temperament. She holds grudges and doesn't remember kindness. I should stay away from her. No matter how I treat her, how can I compare to the Qin couple who raised her? She could even abandon the Qin couple just like that. How could she remember my kindness? Forget it, forget it. In the future, I won't do this kind of thing. After raising her for a year or so, I'll marry her off. She's just like Yusiu. She's also a troublemaker. Mama Ma repeatedly nodded. After deliberating for a while, she said, "That girl also said that Madam might want to snatch the power of the family from Miss Xiang'er. The old lady, what do you think?" Hearing this, the matriarch was truly furious. She coldly snorted, "The power of the family? With just her? The current Marquis household isn't the same as the Marquis household during the Junjie era. With her little ability, I'm afraid she won't be able to handle it. However, if she dares to open her mouth, I can fulfill her wish." Mama Ma was greatly alarmed when she heard this. She reminded the old lady, "What if something goes wrong?" Just as the matriarch said, the current Marquis Yongle was very different from the past. Although Yu Pinyin had the title of General of the Light Cavalry, he had already returned the tiger tally to the Emperor. He wholeheartedly wanted to be the Emperor's sword, cutting through thistles and thorns to advance forward while bathed in blood. In order to pave the way for the Crown Prince to ascend the throne, the emperor had already gotten rid of a few princes with different surnames. In the coming year, he would make his move against the entrenched and complicated aristocratic families. Under this situation, Marquis Yongle could only be a solitary official. He definitely couldn't associate himself with any party. Not only did Yu Pinyin have to control this, but the interactions between the women in the inner compound also couldn't cross the emperor's bottom line. In the past, Yu Xiang had done very well. In the matriarch's opinion, he couldn't be any better. She didn't expect Xiang to be so intelligent. She could even figure out the emperor's intentions so thoroughly. She didn't even need to remind her. Before the Lin clan became muddled, they were very clever and capable. However, that kind of cleverness was limited to the inner compound's small calculations and careful schemes. They couldn't compare to Xiang's broad horizons. If this family was handed over to the Lin clan, there would definitely be trouble. The matriarch thought it over, then waved her hand and said, "If she dares to open her mouth, then let her handle it. Xiang and I will watch from the side. Nothing big will happen." Xiang managed the Marquis household with an iron fist. She had learned it from her brother. With the Lin clan's petty tricks, it will collapse in just a few months. All these years, she has stubbornly stayed in the main room and indulged in the past. I can't find anything wrong with her. This time, I'll let her run wild. Once I find something to use against her, I'll have her take the divorce letter and go home. Her maiden family won't be able to say anything. After hearing this, Mama Ma finally understood the matriarch's plan. That's right. Missing her late husband wasn't a mistake. The old lady didn't want to tolerate the Lin clan anymore. After 14 years, she should be reaching the end of her tolerance. Master Ho. Mama Ma couldn't help but remind her. You should go ask Yen if he still recognizes the Lin clan as his mother. The matriarch sneered. Previously, she didn't make a big fuss because she was worried about her grandson's face. This time, after bringing back Yu Miaoqi, she finally saw her grandson's true heart. She was afraid that her grandson didn't want to recognize the Lin clan anymore. He also didn't want to recognize Yu Miaoqi. Otherwise, how could he have such an indifferent attitude? She doesn't recognize Master Ho. Naturally, Master Ho won't recognize her either. She doesn't have Master Ho in her heart. All she thinks about is Second Mississippi. She doesn't even think about who earned her good days all these years. Mama Ma shook her head and sighed. The matriarch also sighed deeply. She picked up a Buddhist scripture and chanted in a low voice. In the main room, the Lin clan didn't know that except for Mama Kim and her two daughters, the rest of the servants in their courtyard had become the matriarch and Yu Xiang's informants. They still thought that they were the old matriarch who always kept their word. They didn't hide anything from others at all. Yu Miaoqi didn't know the inside story. Seeing her act so recklessly, she also relaxed. The mother and daughter discussed how to tell the matriarch. They didn't sleep until 8:45. Chapter 53. When mother and daughter arrived, the matriarch was in the middle of her morning ritual. Anyone in the Lin clan who was observant would know of the matriarch's habits over the past 14 years. However, she was not observant and could only lead her daughter to sit in the side hall and wait. After pouring 2 pots of tea, she saw Mama Ma supporting the matriarch, who was covered in the scent of Buddhist incense, out. It's been 14 years. This is the first time you've paid your respects to me, right? It's truly rare. The matriarch leaned on the couch and slowly sipped her tea. However, she didn't even look at the Lin clan. The first time in 14 years that she had paid her respects. Then what had her mother been doing these past 14 years? Yu Miaoqi glanced at the Lin clan in astonishment. Only now did she understand why the relationship between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was so stiff. The Lin clan was rather embarrassed. Just as they were racking their brains to think of how to please their mother-in-law, they saw Wuxia walk in with morning dew. Seeing the matriarch, she was slightly surprised and immediately bowed in greeting. This gave the Lin clan a way out. It was rare that her attitude towards the concubine-born daughter was warmer than before. She personally helped the concubine-born daughter up. The matriarch waved her hand for everyone to sit. Her gaze swept towards Yumiauchi's waist. She pretended to unintentionally say, "Where's the protective talisman I gave you? Why don't I see it hanging on your body? That was consecrated by a senior monk. It can ward off evil spirits and protect one's safety." Yumiauchi didn't feel guilty at all. Instead, she smiled sweetly and replying to grandmother, "Because it was a gift from grandmother, granddaughter doesn't dare wear it every day for fear of wear and tear. I only put it under my pillow to ensure that I sleep peacefully. Granddaughter thanks grandmother for her love and care." If the matriarch hadn't heard the news earlier, she wouldn't have been able to see any resentment or disdain from this extremely sincere smile. Not only was her temperament so cold, but she was also very good at pretending. How did the Lin clan raise her to become like this? Not to mention that she was born with a fiendish fate, but with her cold heart and cold lungs, she would be a disaster to any family. The matriarch didn't deny that she didn't like Yumiauchi because of the Lin clan's favoritism. However, at first, she only wanted to compete with the Lin clan. When she saw the real person, that bit of dislike turned into 70 to 80% disgust. The more decent Yumiauchi behaved in front of her, the more it set off her treacherous and vicious nature. He had only given her a piece of talisman paper, yet she was already filled with resentment. How could she not hate Yandere, who had caused her to be imprisoned twice in the past? To what extent did she hate Xiang'er, who had taken over her position? Thinking up to this point, 70 to 80% disgust turned into extreme vigilance. Old Madame Fu felt uncomfortable even looking at her now, so she simply turned her head away and said in a low voice, "Do whatever you want. Just keep it." Yumiauchi had always been good at reading people's expressions. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Wuxia knew what to do and started chatting about this and that. She emphasized which families had gotten engaged, given the betrothal gifts, and were about to hold a wedding. The matriarch looked at her thoughtfully and said impatiently, "Don't talk to me about these miscellaneous things. Just say that you want to get married. You can't wait for me to discuss the marriage with the Fong family, right?" Wuxia's face flushed red. She lowered her head and forcefully stirred her handkerchief, not daring to respond. The matriarch's mood became even worse. She waved her hand and said, "I'll take care of this matter in the future. Just don't regret it. Since you've already achieved your goal, why aren't you leaving?" She felt a headache whenever she saw these two idiots who thought themselves clever. Wuxia bowed and took her leave. When she crossed the threshold, she couldn't help but reveal a trace of joy. When she was far away, Mama Ma quietly muttered, "Old madam, didn't that official Fong already get beheaded by Master Ho? His family's wealth was confiscated." The matriarch waved her hand, indicating for her to stop talking. When the Lin clan and Yumiauchi heard this, they couldn't help but look at each other. They saw a light in each other's eyes. The matriarch didn't notice. Just as she was about to send the mother and daughter away, Yumiauchi got up and took her leave, saying that she was going to visit her younger sister. The Lin clan looked at their mother-in-law with a determined expression. Yumiauchi arrived at the west wing under the guidance of Bao Sheng. There were two small courtyards in the west wing. They weren't too far from each other. The one facing the south had better lighting and occupied a larger area. Naturally, it belonged to Yuxiang. The east wing belonged to Wuxia. Yumiauchi passed through the corridor and stepped through the drooping flower door. Everywhere she looked, there were all kinds of exotic flowers and plants in full bloom. There were also countless bees and butterflies fluttering in the brilliant sunlight, carrying with them an indescribable rich fragrance. Such a vibrant and colorful little courtyard should have been incompatible with the majestic and strict Marquis Yongla's residence, yet it strangely blended in. It was like a paradise of peach blossoms that had been lost in the mortal world, yet it also seemed like a small greenhouse left in a frozen land, causing one to be incomparably delighted. Yu Miaoqi stood in front of the courtyard wall full of blooming flowers. She was somewhat intoxicated, but she was interrupted by a noisy voice. "Someone's here, someone's here. Miss, someone's here." She turned to look. It was the parrot, Lu, who was hanging in the corridor. Yu Miaoqi seemed to wake up from a dream. She walked towards the door with a feeling of jealousy and resentment. To think that as the legitimate daughter of the Marquis family, she could only squeeze in with her mother, but Yu Xiang had such an exquisite and dreamy courtyard. It was really unfair to the extreme. All of this should have belonged to her. Yu Xiang was shaken awake by Lulu early in the morning. In her daze, she heard that the Lin clan had burned the protective talisman and wanted to seize power. She said disapprovingly, "Let her be. I'll see if she has the ability." Then her head tilted and she fell asleep again. Lulu had no choice but to order someone to bring breakfast. She shook the fragrant shredded chicken and matsutake porridge in front of her master's nose. She didn't need anyone to wake her up. Unexpectedly, before the porridge was brought over, Lu shouted. Lulu hurriedly welcomed Yu Miaoqi into the side hall and said apologetically, replying to second miss, "Miss is currently sleeping. I'll have to trouble you to sit down and wait for a moment. This servant will go and wake her up. I'll also go take a look. I naturally want to take a look at Mimi's boudoir." Yu Miaoqi smiled very amiably and took the lead to step through the doorway. The room wasn't big, but the furnishings were very luxurious and exquisite. The antique porcelain on the antique shelves were all very old. The furniture was made of Phoebe Jianan wood and rosewood, which were very expensive. The dressing table was very large, with a bronze mirror, a makeup brush, a grate, and other things. There seemed to be a lot of things in the dressing table. The lid couldn't be closed and was only loosely hung with a bronze lock. A pillar of sunlight shone through the window, faintly reflecting the colorful lights inside. If she really opened it, she didn't know how dazzling it would be. Yu Miaoqi's smile became even more graceful and appropriate. In reality, the tip of her heart was bleeding drop by drop. Thick venom flowed out from the festering wound called jealousy, corroding her bones until they hurt. "What time is it? Why hasn't Mimi woken up yet? The sun is almost up to your butt." She sat down on the soft couch by the window as she spoke in a teasing manner. Her soft, gentle, and melodious voice was extremely pleasing to the ear, and no one would be able to imagine that at this moment, a roaring ferocious beast was being imprisoned in her heart. Yu Xiang mumbled under Lulu's push. Only then did she wake up faintly. She lifted the bed curtain and yawned as she lazily said, "Mimi, you're here." Seeing the girl's true face without makeup, Yu Miaoqi's heart was torn again. Without the rich colors, the girl's face was less fierce and more sweet. She had light and stylish smoky eyebrows, black and bright starry eyes, a straight nose, and cherry lips. Her temperament was pure and charming. It was truly a very lovable face. In addition, her behavior was unruly and her temperament was perverse. When she slept, she didn't wear any undergarments. She only wore a small yellow dudu and a pair of tulle bloomers of the same color. This made her soft and round breasts even more prominent. Her waist was slender, and her skin was like cream. She was truly a stunner. Her appearance was so magnificent and her bearing was so excellent that it caused Yu Miaoqi's mind to fall into a daze, and two charming and gentle lines of poetry naturally appeared in her mind. Jade arms lift up the misty canopy, full of vitality and fragrance. Even a woman like her couldn't help but be moved, let alone a man. Fortunately, her legs were crippled. Otherwise, it wouldn't be difficult for her to enter the palace and become a favored concubine. Yu Miaoqi felt a burst of pain. She had unconsciously bitten her lower lip and quickly wiped the blood away with a handkerchief. Yu Xiang didn't know that she was thinking of many irrelevant things in an instant. She stretched out her hands and allowed Tao Hong and Lu Lu to help her dress. Then, with the help of the two people, she sat in a wheelchair and pushed it to the dressing table to wipe her face and teeth. She put the salted willow branch into her mouth and asked in a muffled voice, "Does Jijia like the hair ornament I gave Jijia? I like it very much. Today, I especially came to thank Jijia." Yu Miaoqi stroked the hair ornament in her hair and smiled very sincerely. Yu Xiang didn't even look at her. She spat out the mouthwash and used a hot handkerchief to wipe her face clean. Then, she opened a small bottle and smeared a finger of moisturizer on her face. The rich fragrance of lotus wafted through the room, making people feel a little dizzy. Yu Miaoqi knew that the stuff she applied must be extraordinary. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to cultivate such a body of ice and jade. If she hadn't hugged the wrong person back then, these things should have belonged to her. This sentence was like a curse that kept reverberating in her mind. Then, it bound her heart round and round, sinking deep into her flesh and bone, and could never be removed again. Yu Xiang glanced at her from the bronze mirror and asked casually, "Where's the protective talisman that ancestor gave Jijia? Why don't I see Jijia wearing it? I put it under my pillow when I went out. After all, it's a paper product. I'm afraid it will be worn out if I wear it every day." Yu Miaoqi picked up the teacup to cover the disdain on her lips. It was just a piece of paper. Was it worth these two people mentioning it again and again? Yu Xiang raised her eyebrows and chuckled, "Jijia, didn't ancestor give you an exquisite pouch with a colorful silk ribbon tied to it? That means you can wear it around your waist every day. It's pretty and can press the hem of your skirt. Jijia, you don't know that the protective talisman was asked by ancestor from divine monk Kohai 4 years ago. It's been enshrined in the Zhenghua temple all these years. It's a good thing that many people can't get their hands on. At that time, I was wondering why ancestor kept it, but it turned out to be a gift to Jijia. It's clear that ancestor has always been concerned about Jijia." Yu Miaoqi smelled a trace of jealousy in her words. Although she didn't show it on her face, she was very happy in her heart. But no matter how much she said, a piece of paper was just a piece of paper. What could it be worth? However, she was very satisfied that the old madam valued her. So, she just had to find the pouch and wear it when she went back. After all, she was her granddaughter. How could she not love her? As long as she lived long enough, she would be able to surpass this lowly child in front of the old madam. Thinking of this, Yu Miaoqi's lips curled up slightly. Yu Xiang looked at her expression in the bronze mirror and felt her heart grow colder. If a normal person heard these words, they would more or less show a trace of regret for burning the talisman. However, she couldn't see the slightest bit of remorse or self-blame in the other party's eyes. Yu Miaoqi held grudges and didn't remember kindness. Sure enough, she was just as her brother described. She was an extremely cold-hearted person. So, even if she didn't want to fight with her, she was afraid it wouldn't do. The author has something to say: "Thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi." Chapter 54. Many thoughts ran through her mind, but Yu Xiang's hands didn't stop moving. After applying the moisturizer, she didn't need to apply anything else. She only smeared a bit of peach blossom powder on her cheeks, the corners of her eyes, and her lips. Then, she used a brush to lightly sweep her eyebrows. Afterwards, she used several peach wood hairpins to form a flower bun. She pinched a peach blossom flower ornament and stuck it between her eyebrows. Her simple peach blossom makeup was done. She tilted her head slightly to look at the beautiful figure in the bronze mirror. She really was more beautiful than flowers, as sweet as honey. She couldn't help but smile. As soon as she started to move, Yu Miaoqi had been watching her carefully. She secretly memorized every step she took. It said that 30% looks and 70% makeup. Not only was this person very good-looking, but her makeup skills were superb. It was also because she was in the marquis household. Otherwise, how could she have the leisure to think about it every day? Yu Miaoqi felt that she shouldn't think too much about it. If she thought too deeply, her hatred for Yu Xiang would increase. She couldn't hide it even if she wanted to. Yu Xiang was also secretly observing her through the bronze mirror. Suddenly, she pursed her lips and smiled. Jie, it's strange. You and I are twin sisters, but why don't we look like each other at all? I'm so beautiful, but Jie looks a bit dull. She gently stroked her cheeks as she spoke. She seemed to feel that her bluntness was a bit hurtful. She quickly covered her cherry lips with a handkerchief and looked apologetic. Actually, Yu Miaoqi wasn't bad looking. She could even be said to be incomparably beautiful. However, when compared to the extremely gorgeous Yu Xiang, she paled in comparison. What people feared the most was comparison. Yu Miaoqi's gentle and elegant smile almost disappeared. She fiercely dug her nails into her palms before she calmly said, "There are plenty of people who have twins who don't look alike. There's nothing strange about it. I look like my mother, but who do you look like, Jie? Who do you look like? You're a bastard." Yu Xiang's smile grew even sweeter as she continued, "Of course I take after my older brother. Don't you realize that I'm 50% similar to my older brother?" With that, she turned her face towards her. Yu Miaoqi took a closer look and was shocked to find that she was indeed 50% similar to Yu Pinyin, especially the insufferably arrogant aura between her eyebrows. No wonder no one doubted her identity before she was 10 years old. The world was so big, and the capital and Lingnan were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers. She had nothing to do with family Yu, so how could she be like Yu Pinyin? What kind of luck could create such a coincidence? Yu Miaoqi's aura became slightly heavier. She suddenly became dissatisfied with the indifferent features that she inherited from the Lin clan. She was unhappy, but Yu Xiang was happy. She opened the dressing room and searched for a silk flower to wear in her hair. She felt that this one was not satisfactory, and that one was not suitable. In just a moment, there were many jewels piled up on the dressing table. They shone brightly under the sunlight, making people dizzy just by looking at them. Yu Miaoqi, who was angry, was immediately attracted to them. Yu Xiang played with a jasper hairpin in her hand and casually waved at her. "Jie, come here." Yu Miaoqi only hesitated for a moment before slowly walking over. She sat down on the embroidered stool that Lu had brought over. "Does Jie like this hairpin? It matches Jie's outfit very well today," Yu Xiang said as she inserted the jasper hairpin into her hair. She tilted her head and looked at it for a moment. Then she found a golden double-buckled bracelet and put it on her wrist. She praised, "Your jade wrist can't compare to a golden dipper. You're so thin, so thin. Jie's wrist is so white and slender. It should be complemented by thick gold. Of course, top-grade jadeite or red jadeite would also be an excellent match." Yu Miaoqi unconsciously followed her thoughts and carefully savored her words. Yu Xiang gave Lu a look. Lu hurriedly brought over a needle and thread box. Inside it was a piece of ancient satin that had been cut into shape. It had a light purple background and was lightly drawn with silver thread. Not only did it look low-key and gorgeous, but it was also unusually soft to the touch. The cloth trembled slightly, and the aquatic plants, insects, and fish came to life. Yu Xiang draped the satin over her shoulders and said with a smile, "This is 3-layer ancient satin from Hangzhou. It's firm but not hard, soft but not tired. It's very elastic. It's used to make a tube-top dress with flowers and a chiffon tulle blouse. It's hazy and ethereal, like a fairy. Jijia, do you like it?" Yu Miaoqi was fascinated by the scene she described. She lovingly caressed the satin and said absent-mindedly, "I like it." These expensive and luxurious clothes were absolutely impossible to find in the family Shen. It wasn't that the family Shen couldn't afford them, but that they didn't dare to use them even if they bought them. After all, the family Shen was the lowliest merchant in the world. Yu Xiang smiled softly. She put her arms around her neck and rubbed her cheek intimately against her cheek. She coaxed, "If Jijia likes it, I'll give you all of these things. There's only one condition. Please stay away from my brother. My brother is mine alone. I can't share him with you." Yu Miaoqi instantly broke free from the intimate atmosphere she deliberately created. The absent-minded smile on her lips disappeared without a trace. She firmly shook her head, "I'm afraid Jijia can't agree to this." I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis family. My brother is also my brother. Why can you be close to me but not to me? Yu Pinyin was the real master of the Marquis family. It was because of his protection that she could establish herself here. Why couldn't this bastard be close to her? It was simply unreasonable. A wave of anger burned Yu Miaoqi's heart, but she still pulled out a faint and elegant smile and continued, "Jijia, please understand me. I haven't seen my brother for 14 years, Yu Xiang put her arms around her neck and smiled, "That's right. 14 years have passed. What's the point of seeing each other again? It's the same even if you endure for another 14 years. After all, you'll reach the age of marriage. Since Jijia isn't willing to agree, then let's go. I should eat." She let go of her hand and expressionlessly took off her hairpin, bracelet, and satin. She waved at Lulu, who was sweating profusely, "Send second miss back." She turned her face mercilessly. Yu Miaoqi had traveled extensively with Father Shen, but this was the first time she saw someone change their face so quickly. She was dumbfounded. It wasn't until Lulu urged her twice that she came back to her senses. She forced herself to maintain an elegant demeanor and said, "Jijia, why are you making such a joke? You scared me. I'll come visit Jijia next time." She slightly nodded, lifted the curtain, and slowly left. Lulu's face was red. She sent the master and servants out of the Chuehua gate before turning back and asking in a low voice, "Miss, why did you quarrel with second miss for no reason? You're all family." Yu Xiang ordered Tao Hong to push her to the dining table. She picked up the shredded chicken and matsutake congee and sniffed it. She slowly said, "Who's family with her? Don't be fooled by her gentle smile, she's probably cursing me in her heart. Look at her behavior. She burned the protective talisman that old ancestor painstakingly begged for. Isn't it because she hates old ancestor for ignoring her for 14 years? Her heart is smaller than the tip of a needle. She spends her days in the nunnery, while I'm enjoying the splendor of the Marquis household. Don't you think she's jealous? Since I've already seen through her character, why should I feign civility with her? I might as well shed all pretense of cordiality as soon as possible. That way, I'll feel more comfortable." Tao Hong was scared speechless. Lulu pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "Someone with an indifferent and elegant temperament wouldn't be jealous. But looking at second Mrs. appearance, she's been blinded by lard and hates her whole family. She's been cultivating in the nunnery for 14 years, but she hasn't achieved anything. Isn't that so?" Yu Xiang scooped a spoonful of porridge into her mouth and muttered silently, "It seems that the family Shen is really down and out. Otherwise, how could she have so much resentment?" Unfortunately, Even if she guessed the inside story, Yu Xiang didn't dare to send people to investigate the family Shen's whereabouts. She was afraid that Yu Pinyin would find out. She wanted to be his brother and sister for the rest of their lives. That way, they could be together for the rest of their lives. Yu Miaoqi left the small courtyard. Her footsteps became faster and faster, but she suddenly stopped in front of a rockery. She placed her palms on the rock and gasped for breath. She was about to be angered to death by Yu Xiang, but she couldn't vent her anger. Staying with her for only half an hour could shorten her lifespan by 10 years. She really wanted to tear her mouth apart. The two maidservants saw that there was no one around. One patted her on the back, while the other comforted her in a soft voice, "Second miss, don't bicker with Miss 3. Her temper is like that. Even if her things are ruined, she won't let others touch them. Eldest miss has suffered countless losses at her hands. Now, she's not even willing to set foot in her small courtyard. In the future, you just need to keep a distance from her. How can my older brother be considered a thing? He's also my older brother. Why can't I get close to him? It's simply preposterous." Yu Miaoqi was unable to calm her anger. The two maidservants didn't know how to respond. Just as they were thinking about it, they saw Yu Pinyin striding over wearing a crimson official's robe. Yu Miaoqi also noticed him at the same time. She was stunned for a moment before forcefully pinching her palms. Her eyes were red as she greeted him. Greets older brother. Older brother, are you preparing to visit younger sister Xiang'er? Yu Pinyin glanced at her. He didn't nod or respond and directly walked over. Although he wasn't the type to judge people by their appearance, he really couldn't bring himself to like this mournful face that resembled the Lin clan's. Yu Miaoqi was stunned. She reflexively tugged at his sleeve. Seeing his cold gaze sweep over her, she didn't need to put on an act as tears streamed down her face. She sorrowfully asked, "Older brother, I just wanted to ask you. Are you really my biological older brother?" Yu Pinyin didn't have the patience to beat around the bush with her. He said in a low voice, "What do you want to say?" Yu Miaoqi's self-esteem was hurt by his cold attitude, and her tears fell even more fiercely. Tao Hong, who was about to go to the kitchen to get food, saw this from afar. He hurriedly tiptoed back to inform the others. This second miss was truly sinister. She was so quick to complain to Master Ho. Yu Pinyin was annoyed by her crying. He frowned and was about to leave. Yu Miaoqi finally felt his pulse and understood that he didn't like people crying. She hurriedly wiped her tears with her sleeve and quickly said, "Older brother, you're my biological older brother. Why doesn't younger sister Xiang'er allow me to get close to you?" What kind of logic is this? I've been longing to return to my family for the past 4 years, but all I've received is this cold treatment. What did I do wrong? Yu Pinyin finally looked at her. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Xiang'er doesn't allow you to get close to me?" Yu Miaoqi's eyes brightened. She held back her tears and nodded. She said that older brother is only her older brother and can't share you with me. But clearly, I'm the real. Because there were two maidservants who didn't know the truth, Yu Miaoqi didn't intend to let them know about her background before she could completely tame them. She swallowed back her unfinished words. Yu Pinyin lowered his eyes and pondered for a moment. The coldness on his face instantly disappeared. He shook his head and chuckled as he strode away. Looking at the direction he was heading in, it seemed, Yu Xiang's small courtyard. Yu Miaoqi was dumbfounded. She stood there blankly for a moment before regaining her senses. She asked, "What's with older brother's reaction? Is he angry or not?" Bao Sheng was a child of the Marquis family. He shook his head with certainty. How could Master Ho be angry at Miss 3? He's just happy. Clearly, I'm the one who's being bullied. Why is he happy? Yu Miaoqi bit her lip and a trace of blood dripped down. Bao Sheng was startled. He hurriedly wiped her mouth with a handkerchief and comforted her. Master Ho has always been like this. It doesn't matter if Miss 3 is in the right or not. In his eyes, the wrong person is always the other person. Miss 3 is good in every way. That year, Miss 3 severely injured a noble lady with a few whips. When that family came to seek justice, Master Ho almost chopped them up. Second Miss, you must not be angry with Miss 3. It's only right that you please her first. To say something unpleasant, if Miss 3 hates you, you won't be able to get anything good from Master Ho. In the future, if Miss 3 wronged you, you just have to endure it. Their 14 years of friendship is first, and they also saved your life. You can't compare to them. Okay. Yu Miaoqi almost broke her teeth from gritting them. She suppressed her monstrous anger and said in a low voice, I understand. In the future, I'll definitely get along well with younger sister. Let's go see big sister. Seeing that her complexion had returned to normal, the two maidservants helped her to the small courtyard on the east side of the courtyard. The author has something to say. Thank you to my rich and adorable creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Seeing that there are dear readers who are urging me for the plot, I'll explain here. It's not that I'm deliberately delaying the plot, but that there are a lot of foreshadowing and details that need to be laid out. Otherwise, the plot won't be able to unfold later. This article will probably be written rather long, so I'll grasp the pace well. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.